I was living my absolute best hermit life as a college shut-in, happily buried deep in video games and anime, right up until the universe rudely interjected and forced an abrupt career change on me. One second I'm chilling, watching cartoons, and the next, everything goes pitch black, super dramatic-like. With zero warning, I wake up sporting some scratchy peasant clothes inside a log cabin. It's straight out of fantasy RPG, wolf pelts covering the floor, a deer head mounted on the wall, and furniture that honestly looks like it was carved with a spoon. My mind immediately goes, oh no, no. This is one of those transmigration setups, isn't it? Before I can even have a proper mental breakdown, some guy clad in fur, armor with a bow slung across his back strolls in and calls me son. Cool. Guess I have a dad now. A hunter dad. Pops tells me I need to pack up because tomorrow I'm shipping out to the capital. As it turns out, this entire kingdom is currently at war with 4 other countries. The king is drafting literally everyone, and lucky me, I just tested positive for an affinity with earth element magic. I'm the very first magic user this tiny village has ever produced. I am basically the local celebrity here, except, instead of receiving a trophy, I am being sent to die in a war. But wait a second, magic? All that gloom instantly evaporated from my mind like morning fog. Sure, I basically got ice-skied straight into a war zone, but I actually get to be a wizard. That is the ultimate dream. And earth magic? I was literally majoring in civil engineering back in my old world. The universe sure has a twisted sense of humor. Then things got weird. For random words suddenly popped into my head out of nowhere. Spirit of the earth. And the moment I mumbled them, a massive, thick grimoire materialized right in my hands. The cover read, Earth Magic Book, written in lettering so bright it practically smacked me in the face. A cheat item. A legendary artifact. I really am a chosen one. I ripped it wide open with trembling hands and couldn't read a single word inside. Not a single one on the pages. They could have been ancient alien shopping lists. So I've got a god-tier grimoire I can't even use. Typical. I stashed the book by muttering those magic words once more. Honestly, this storage system is pretty slick. Like an enchanted Kindle that never dies. I finally hit the sack, trying to stay positive. The next morning, my hunter dad obsessive checked my bags like I was off to summer camp. Then we made our way to the local enlistment center. And that's where all my 3 besties pulled up. Well, technically, the original Luo's besties. But I'd absorbed all of his memories overnight. So I was completely up to speed on the squad's lore. First up is Rona, a purple-haired chick determined to be a combat medic, mostly because she's apparently pure main character energy. Then there's Giles, the mayor's kid, who instantly called her my Rona, and promptly got his foot crushed into the dirt for it. And finally, Walker, a massive blonde guy, the sheriff's son, who totally radiates responsible mom-friend vibes. All 3 of them actually volunteered for service. Meanwhile, I, the literal only magic user here, was the one who got aggressively conscripted. The rest of the crew is charging ahead with pure patriotic hype, while I'm just an ice-skied nerd trying to handle the confusion and not instantly perish. Fantastic start to this new life. The enlistment. Officer scanned me over like I was some shiny, legendary Pokemon. He told me I was in luck and gestured toward a fancy, high-end carriage. My buddies, on the other hand, got the standard grunt treatment. Giles had a rough 30-kilometer march ahead of him and was immediately throwing a fit about it. Rona scored a horse ride since she's a lady, which only made Giles even saltier. Walker just told him to shut his mouth and follow the rules. Classic Walker. While the coach journeyed northward to the capital, my mind kept drifting back to my hunter dad standing out there, watching me depart. See, the thing is, back in my old world, my actual dad passed away when I was just a kid. So having this rugged woodsman babying me like I'm fragile, yeah, that struck a chord. I never planned on getting emotional during this ice guy journey, but life comes at you fast. The coachman suggested I review the documents on my seat. So I flipped open this brochure, which kicked off with a direct message from King Nelson VI. Total hype material, full of, your country needs your service. And, I believe in your inner power, pal. Dude, I've literally been a mage for like 24 hours. The manual was split into 4 parts. Elementary magic theory. A guide for pronouncing incantation syllables. Beginner spells for every element and battle strategies. The way magic works here is honestly pretty insane. Aside from the standard 4 elements, wind, water, fire, and earth, you have lightning, ice, light, dark, nature, summoning time, space, and even forbidden categories like necromancy and hexes. Plus, dragons and elves boast their own unique magic too. It feels like someone built an MMO class lineup and absolutely lost their mind with it. The section on spell pronunciation was basically Just 268 syllables paired up with phonetic breakdowns. Like a magic ABCs for Dummies guide. I fast-forwarded to the Earth Magic portion to see my grand total of unlocked abilities. Exactly 2. Stone Skin and Rock Reinforcement. That's it. That is my whole kit. I conjured my cheat code grimoire to double-check. And sure enough, those exact 2 spells appeared right on the opening pages. So the manual is legit. I just can't decipher the rest yet because it's encoded, written in an ancient, arcane tongue. Next, I checked out the battle tactics segment, and I damn near chucked the booklet out the window. Apparently, the grand military strategy for Earth mages is buff yourself with Stone Skin, and then dive headfirst into close combat like a total psycho. That isn't a tactic. That's just a suicide note with a few extra steps along the way. Eventually, the carriage scooped up 4 more arcane recruits, 3 guys from the fire element, and a water element girl named Air. We all started chatting, but the second I let slip that I was an earth element, everyone stared at me like I'd just announced I had 3 months left to live. Air gently broke it down for me, explaining that earth magic is pretty much the absolute bottom of the barrel. Weak damage, the tiniest spell pool of any school, and pretty much anything under level 5 is totally useless, all while burning through your mana pool like crazy. Oh, and to top it off, most mages never even hit level 4 in their entire lives. Just wonderful. A dark-haired kid named Quick helpfully chimed in that I had precisely 2 potential paths ahead of me. Option 1. I get deployed to patch up fortress walls like some glorified magical construction worker. Totally safe, but mind-numbing. Option 2. I get shoved onto the front lines to cast Stone Skin onto active soldiers in the heat of battle. Highly unsafe, and absolutely not boring. The guy literally ended his speech with, "Pray for yourself." I also gathered that these kids all grew up with proper magic. Training in their hometowns. Regular assessments every 3 years. Foundational magic classes in grade school. The whole 9 yards. Meanwhile, my tiny, isolated village apparently had 0 of that. So not only did I get stuck with the weakest element, but I'm also the most clueless rookie in this entire carriage. At the very least, everyone else already knew that magic tracking has 10 tiers. I didn't even know tiers existed. As it turns out, legit magic training, enrollment at the capital's 4 elite academies, is strictly for aristocrats and individuals possessing rare element talents. As for us standard tier peasants, they pack us off to some training camp out of town for an intensive crash course before throwing us straight into the front lines. We were pretty much just magical cannon fodder. By dusk, wallowing in total self-pity, I got back to drilling meditation methods and incantation phrasing, while our coach neared a southern town named Orko. I mean, what else is it doomed? Dirt wizard with a bargain book he can't decipher, supposed to do? Study harder and pray for luck. And so we made it into Orko City, the 4th largest urban hub in the Kingdom of Crete, and my travel buddies completely lost their minds. These small-town kids had never laid eyes on structures constructed out of actual masonry before that, alone enchanted streetlights and high-end boutiques everywhere. Fair play, it was genuinely remarkable, akin to exiting a basic Minecraft hamlet and instantly dropping into a massive AAA open-world environment. Yet the true showstopper was the local Mages Guild outpost. Gargantuan ramparts, with violet-pointed spires soaring up behind them, radiating an absolute. You were stepping into a highly restricted zone, aura. Our driver informed us we'd sleep the night here and receive guidance from a certified sorcerer. Everyone inside the coach began celebrating like they'd hit the jackpot. Quick clarified that typically even novice apprentices are banned from entering these sites. Never mind uncertified randoms like ourselves. Perks of a military draft, folks. A doorman in white robes cross-referenced our passes roughly 15 times before granting entry to meet our mentor, a middle-aged man in violet vestments who practically oozed "I would rather be anywhere else" vibes. 0 pleasantries, no opening remarks. He just demanded we chant the magical phrasing. So we all blundered through the 268 incantations, while the guy in purple fixed our pronunciation, acting like the ultimate terrifying linguistics coach. Next, he made us drill the focus technique. Once he was convinced we weren't total lost causes, his expression softened from a furious brick wall to a slightly less pissed-off brick wall. Then he ordered us to practice for at least 5 hours a day. 5 whole hours. Man, I barely hit the books 5 hours a week back in college. He led us to a practice hall, divided into 4 colored sectors, red meaning fire, blue representing water, yellow for earth. The trio of fire guys went to hurl bursts at bullseyes, She went to work on liquid projectiles and barriers, and I headed to my pathetic little yellow zone to test out hardening skin and reinforcing boulders, my grand total of 2 abilities. This is where things got wild. For those 3 fire blokes, absolutely zilch happened. They screamed and flailed their arms around like they were directing traffic, but didn't create a single ember. She managed to momentarily shape a liquid spike before it went totally flat. Apparently, that was stellar. Enough for Purple Robes to check off a box. By her name, and his eyes drifted to me, fully expecting another flop. Except I'd already shifted my entire frame to stark white with earthen armor, nailing it on my very first actual shot. His face went through this epic progression from pure boredom to bafflement to absolute shock. He marched right over, analyzing my flesh like a medic who just stumbled upon some rare medical mystery and demanded to know if I'd done sorcery before. I told him no way. So then he commanded me to cast the earthen armor on the other 4 rookies. I knocked them out, one right after the other. Bam, 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 bam. Everyone went pale. 5 successful spells in, and I wasn't even winded yet. Next, he made me shoot rock reinforcement at a designated test wall. Another 5 perfect casts before I finally hit my limit and slumped to the floor like a pop balloon. That makes 10 spells in total. Word is, a typical apprentice can only manage around 3. Plus, my magic was way stronger and covered a much wider range than normal. The purple-robed guy scanned me for hidden magical items, came up empty, and I could literally see the gears grinding his head. Now, I know exactly why I'm OP. It's totally that unreadable bargain book stuck inside my head. But I'm definitely not spilling that secret. So I just stood there looking modest, while celebrating like crazy on the inside. Purple Robe, turns out his name is Morgan, sighed, and dropped the most backhanded compliment I've ever heard. Your magical talent is extraordinary. Such a pity it's wasted on the earth element. Gee, thanks Morgan. Really feeling the love here. But right after, he offered me a legit shot. If I make it through the war and rack up some achievements, I ought to return to Orko City. And he tried to put in a good word for me at a real magic academy. The other 4 rookies just stared at me with pure jealousy. For once, the underdog earth element kid was getting the star treatment. Morgan gave me one-on-one lessons for the rest of the evening, while the others just kept grinding. I absorbed everything like a sponge, or to be more precise, like a dude who knows his life. Depends on keeping up. The next morning before deployment, Morgan drew me aside and covertly passed me a bag containing a mid-tier meditation guide, a handbook for mental concentration, plus a tiny vial of mana-restoring elixir. Pretty much a survival kit, meaning, please don't croak. You're far too amusing. He reminded me, surviving is your top priority in combat. I stashed the pouch beneath my clothes, offered him my sincerest gratitude, and climbed back inside the coach. Just 2 days in this world, and I've already scored a secret, OP grimoire, a mentor who trusts in me and the fighting skills of someone way above my pay grade. Not half bad for a guy whose official role is just human meat shield. Following a rough morning commute, we made it to boot camp. And by boot camp, I mean a massive, isolated dirt structure that looked like someone cast Earth Fortify on a warehouse and just walked away. The driver passed over our evaluation sheets, gave a wave, and split, speeding off toward the capital like he couldn't get out fast enough. Smart move. The interior was basically one giant vacant hall, lined with 2 rows of individual tents along the walls, plus a crowd of teens seated on the ground, meditating. It looked like the world's most stressed-out yoga session. Perched right in the center was our new coach, a guy named Andre in light armor and a red robe, who possessed all the friendliness of a stone wall. Grab a tent, dump your gear, and start focus training. That was the intro speech. 5 stars. Truly welcoming. I began practicing Morgan's intermediate meditation method and instantly realized why they called it intermediate. It sapped my mental focus so rapidly that I had to take a breather every half hour. Everyone sitting around me was secretly pitying the poor scrub who couldn't even manage to meditate right. They had no clue that I was speedrunning the advanced training while they were just coasting on the rookie level. My manacap was skyrocketing way faster than theirs. But go ahead, look down on the Earth Mage. By evening, I didn't mind. All 300 trainees had finally shown up, and Andre dropped the first bombshell. Anyone who can't whip up a full spell before lights out tonight is getting cut. The room went dead silent. He casually whipped up a fireball in his palm, just to make it clear he wasn't messing around. Then came bombshell number 2. Starting tomorrow, you'll meditate for 20 hours a day. If your mana pool doesn't hit apprentice tier by the end of camp, you're also out. And here's the kicker. The dropouts get drafted as basic cannon fodder. 300 teens simultaneously had the exact same thought. I'd rather stay alive. Everyone scrambled to grab the mental concentration. Guides like it was a Black Friday sale. Then Andre smirked, actually grinned, and added, "Oh, one last thing. The top 10 rankers get a golden ticket to the Imperial Magic Academy in the capital." The place instantly erupted into a frenzy until Andre barked at us to pipe down, reminding everyone that 10 out of 300 are pretty brutal odds. Next, he called out 2 names, Sedis. Luo Hao. You two are with me for hand-to-hand combat. I stood up from the crowd, right beside a blonde chick who looked like she'd just raided a jewelry boutique, pristine white robes with gold embroidery and enchanted gems everywhere, plus a literally glowing magic staff gripped in her hand. She was pretty much a walking vault of loot. Her wealthy merchant. Folks had clearly blown their entire life savings on turning her into a mage, just so they could secure a noble title. Meanwhile, there am I, standing around in my rags, in a second-hand fur vest, looking straight up like her bodyguard. The whole room was totally obsessing over her equipment, while completely blanking me. Andre, however, wasn't buying the flashy look. He gave Cetus a quick look, before turning his gaze to me with real interest. I spotted him scanning the evaluation sheet and mumbling, "A once-in-a-century prodigy of earth magic. Seriously? Much appreciated, Morgan. Way to fly under the radar." Andre informed us that we'd face brutal physical conditioning, speed exercises, and close-quarters combat on top of our regular workload. C just completely rejected the idea, questioning why mages needed to train like frontline grunts. Andre offered a harsh smirk and replied, "Do you think you're some epic grand mage hovering in the clouds raining down incantations? You lot aren't even basic novices yet. Without combat skills, any seasoned soldier will absolutely wreck you." Valid point. Harshly put, but valid. We moved out to the open air grounds and began grinding out laps. This was exactly when the grueling wilderness survival my hunter dad forced on me finally came in handy. My conditioning was rock solid, so I could keep going forever. Perseus folded after just 2 rounds. Andre watched her without a shred of pity, ordering her to push through. To her credit, she bit the bullet and refused to give up. The pampered wealthy girl actually had some grit. Respect. The drills dragged on until midnight. By that point, Sedis physically couldn't take a single step, so I piggybacked her all the way to the quarters. Andre had already processed the washout roster and was packing the failures off to the standard infantry units that very night. Nothing says sweet dreams quite like watching a vehicle packed with weeping kids getting shipped away to serve as meat shields. I headed back to my quarters. I stumbled upon a total game changer while jogging. I can actually meditate while working out. My body just goes on autopilot. This is straight up a transmigration cheat code. The real Luo Hao definitely couldn't pull this off. So, I can condition my body and level up my mana simultaneously. That's pretty much a 24/7 XP multiplier. I flipped through my spellbook once more before hitting the sack. Aside from stone skin and rock reinforcement, there were tons of entry-level spells I couldn't decipher, since they were all written in some ancient magical tongue. The book is like an all-you-can-eat buffet, but I'm standing here without a menu. Mastering that ancient magic language just became my absolute top priority, right after surviving tomorrow's brutal workout and making sure Andre doesn't kill me for the 4 a.m. wake-up call. The guards roused everyone like flesh and blood alarm clocks, offering absolutely zero snooze options. As the other 300 kids groggily began their meditation, Andre personally hauled me and Sadie's out to the practice grounds, seeing how we're apparently his special pet projects. Aren't we lucky? I quizzed Andre about studying the ancient magical script and finding other Tier 1 Earth-type spells. His reply basically boiled down to, "Save that nerd stuff for the academy later. I don't know any other Earth magic anyway. But here's a Tier 2 quicksand scroll for you to check out." The guy straight up tossed me a spell I can't even cast yet and basically told me to enjoy window shopping. Gee, thanks, coach. Super helpful. During our morning jog, Sadie's somehow managed to look completely fine after yesterday's leg-shattering marathon. I was pretty blown away until she confessed that she'd downed a full body restoration potion overnight. Must be nice having a wallet with bottomless depth. But then she let her guard down a bit and shared a pretty heartbreaking story. If she can't lock down a noble title using magic, her folks are just going to marry her off to some aristocrat. Like a business transaction, she isn't practicing to win glory. She's grinding so she doesn't end up as human merchandise. All of a sudden, that jewelry and magic staff didn't look like luxury anymore. They felt like shackles. I let her pace right behind me to block the wind and for once, I kept my mouth shut. The afternoon was all about combat training with Andre. And holy cow, this guy was a beast. Trying to keep track of his footwork was like chasing a ghost. His hits were pinpoint precise, and he did all of it, while casually maintaining stone skin and water shield without even chanting. C just leaned in and whispered the explanation: battle mages permanently give up their ability to increase their overall magical power, but in return, they can instantly pop off any basic level 1 spell. No incantaciones, cero de ley. It's basically trading away your future to be absolutely terrifying in the present. That totally explains why the kingdom chose Andre to be our coach. For a pack of rookies who'll never cast past level 1, a seasoned battle mage is the ultimate mentor. I glued my eyes to Andre's drills, like my life depended on it, because it honestly did, and I began figuring out how to blend stone skin into my defense at just the right moments, rather than just panic casting it. Andre noticed, and he was secretly impressed by my physical conditioning too, courtesy of all those years of my hunter dad's brutal survival drills. Sieges was totally hitting a wall, but she never opted to throw in the towel, and even Andre respected that. Over the following month, more elite students made the cut for our combat squad, and the routine got completely out of hand. 20 hours of meditation every single day, along with hand-to-hand combat drills. My secret trick, working out while meditating, was pretty much the only thing keeping me going while everyone else was completely running on empty. Yet another batch of washouts flunked out and got packed off to serve as ordinary grunts. Our group of survivors was dwindling fast. That's when they dropped the bombshell. Andre gathered everyone in a line to announce the top 10 names. My chest was pounding as he went down the list one by one. C just made the cut. I made it. 10 guys in total. We were absolutely hyped for about 4 seconds. Then Andre chimed in. Props to you all, but you 10 are deploying straight to the front lines. Hold up, what? A guy named William spoiled the moment and blurted out what we were all thinking. You promised the top 10 would enter the Magic Academy. What happened to that deal? Andre shut him down with cold, hard facts. You morons. Do you even realize we're fighting a full-scale war right now? If our perimeter gets breached, your precious noble status won't mean squat. Then someone shouted from the back. But the realm has 2 legendary super mages guarding us, so there's 0 chance we lose. Andre totally lost it. He snapped and told us that our fire super mage, Master Ryan, has spent his whole damn life up on the northern border, holding off a never-ending assault from the elven clans. Meanwhile, the light super mage, Master Hood, is 73 years old and still hustling across active war zones to heal wounded troops. Both of them passed up their shot at reaching the forbidden spell tier just to keep this kingdom safe. And look at us. A pack of kids who can barely even pass as apprentices, whining about aristocratic privileges. The whole room went completely silent. It felt like I could hear everyone's humiliation bouncing off the walls. Heck, even I felt a bit responsible, and I don't even belong to this world. Andre's demeanor softened a bit, as he mentioned the Academy's vow was genuine, but strictly for those who make it back alive. Next, he began handing out combat assignments. 5 recruits deployed to the eastern sector, and 4 others, cities included, bound for the western front. With that, he shut his ledger, stared straight at me, and announced, "You're off to the southern front." The crowd gasped. The southern front is where the heaviest carnage is. Andre clarified that, as the top-ranking recruit, I won the grand prize of being tossed straight into the meat grinder. What a massive honor, but then he leaned right in and muttered something that legitimately gave me goosebumps. You really are a prodigy at earth magic. I caught you secretly practicing that quicksand spell at night. I completely froze. I swore nobody was watching. He went on, level up your skills quickly and help carry the weight of this realm. You've got a bright path ahead, kid. So he knew the whole time. He witnessed me covertly training a level 2 incantation. That was way past my current grade. Yet instead of calling me out, he actually put his faith in me. I honestly couldn't tell if I was touched or totally terrified, as we all piled into separate transports bound for completely different conflict zones. I bid farewell to Air and the rest of the crew, when suddenly, Seti's bolted right up to me, thrust an ornate little satchel into my hands, and dashed off with her face buried before I could utter a word. So, here's my situation, top of my class in training, heading solo to the most lethal theater of war in the realm, armed with an unreadable spell book, a quicksand tome I learned on the down low, parting gifts from a wealthy girl who probably fancies me, and a heavy pressure from a couple of tutors who think I'm some sort of prodigy. No pressure, right? Sitting in the coach, I opened up CD's little present, unwrapping the pouch as carefully as if I were defusing a bomb. Inside were 3 small vials of amber fluid, and a handwritten message in gorgeous, neat penmanship. Here are 3 basic potions of Earth Element Energy. Each vial grants you 3 additional Tier 1 Earth spells. Thanks for looking after me, and I hope we cross paths again at the Magic Academy. Reading this, I stowed the bag away and caught myself admitting that she really was quite gorgeous. Had an awesome vibe, and, all right, brain, snap out of it. We're heading to the front lines, not writing a romance novel. After 3 full days of a brutal, bumpy carriage ride, I finally made it to the southern frontier. During the trek, I reviewed the military updates. And honestly, guys, the whole political situation is a total train wreck. The Lutab Duchy down south is a completely resource-starved peninsula boxed in by the ocean on 3 sides, meaning we are their only actual neighbor. So, naturally, they've been stirring up trouble for years. Meanwhile, the northern elves go absolutely ballistic every single spring, pushing to expand their woodlands directly into our lands. The eastern and western realms, Liero and Rost, used to be pretty chill neighbors. But when they saw the elves raiding our northern flank, they figured, perfect timing, let's gank them from behind too. So right now, the Kingdom of Crete is catching hands from all 4 sides. At the exact same time, while our pair of archmages are stretched thinner than a tiny bit of butter on way too much toast. I strolled into headquarters, and the welcoming officer took one look at my fresh face, allowed a massive sigh, and muttered, "Great, the high command keeps shattering our standards by deploying weaker and weaker casters. This looks bad." But then he checked my paperwork, stared intently at the words, "Rare Earth Magic Prodigy," and dropped a terrifying line. "We won't be wasting your talent on guard duty. Head over to the Vanguard base." Yeah, that Vanguard, as in the absolute front of the line. The first to strike, first to die crew. My streak of landing in the most ridiculously hazardous spots remains totally untouched. The Vanguard chief assigned me to Infantry Squad 37 as their designated magic user. Approaching their tent, I caught them gossiping about me before stepping inside. A gravelly voice said, "Our previous mage croaked days ago. Let's hope they send someone with actual brains this time." Another dude chimed in, the last guy was a wind caster who thought levitating would look cool. Ended up turning himself into easy target practice for every enemy archer. Then a cheeky, smooth voice. "Man, I hope we get a cute water mage chick this time." The whole room cracked up. The guard pulled back the tent flap and ushered me inside. The captain skimmed through my files and yelled out to the boys, "Look alive, your lovely lady is here." The entire tent immediately erupted in collective groans. Hate to burst your bubble, fellas. But then, lurking in the corner, Luohao Walker. My boy Walker was chilling right there. Out of all the squads, and every single camp across the whole southern front, I somehow end up in his platoon. The hefty grunt beside him asked if we were acquainted, and Walker clarified, "We're from the same hometown." The big guy summed it up flawlessly. "So you're a greenhorn grunt, and he's a greenhorn mage." Fantastic. Captain Cook? Yup, that's his real name. And honestly, I will never stop laughing at it. Welcomed me, saying he expected my full cooperation. Out on the battlefield, even though I lack an official rank, the massive soldier mumbled that their last spellcaster was at least a proper, certified junior mage, whereas now they're stuck with someone who doesn't even qualify, just as a trainee. But then Cook read my record aloud. Training camp number 1, Rare Earth Magic Prodigy. And suddenly, everyone locked in. The big guy's attitude completely flipped. A kid with this much talent, if he'd been born elite, he'd be safely tucked away in some academy. Right now, instead of facing death with us, man, he went from dissing me to backing me up in 30 seconds flat. Putting on my most earnest face, I replied, "Serving the realm is my obligation. I'm proud to stand on the front lines with you all." Nailed it. The whole room's vibe instantly thawed out. Cook filled me in that the platoon has 50 troops, but they've only got 30 sets of gear. Each clash ends up costing them lives. He reckoned my stone skin spell could at least keep 3 more brothers safe. Pretty standard expectations for a novice. Scanning all those desperate, hopeful eyes, something just clicked for me. I spoke up. "Captain, I'll cover all 20 unarmored brothers." Then I proved it right there inside the tent. I triggered stone skin 20 times back to back. 20. The entire place went dead silent. Cook's jaw practically hit the floor. He stammered out, "A typical novice can manage 3. A basic junior mage manages 10. You're no genius. You're a monster." Every single grunt in that tent was staring at me with the raw intensity of starving men. eyeballing an all-you-can-eat buffet. Even Walker. It was incredibly awkward. I pivoted the conversation as quickly as possible and let Walker introduce me to the crew. We all hit it off pretty fast after that. Nothing bonds people like the collective dread of impending combat. Then they realized my stone skin holds for over 5 hours rather than the usual one. Cue another round of stunned faces. At this point, I'm pretty sure Captain Cook was practically ready to crown me a local god. He'd been carrying the brutal weight of losing soldiers in literally every single clash. And out of nowhere, some teenage freak rolls up who can keep his whole unit totally bulletproof for half the day. I could literally see all that massive tension just melting off his shoulders later that night. Cook escorted me over to the sorcerer barracks to crash. As I lay awake inside yet another strange, unfamiliar tent in yet another bizarre place, I ran the numbers. I'm 18. I've survived in this world for roughly 5 weeks. And I'm deployed, right at the deadliest front of a massive 4-way conflict. Plus, tomorrow I might actually have to drop into a real fight. Still, I've got 50 new brothers counting on me. Walker watching my back, a cheap grimoire getting stronger, and arcane abilities that make certified sorcerers look like total rookies. So bring it on, Lutab Duchy. Squad 37 has a brand new powerhouse, baby. Captain Cook walked me over to the caster's quarters for the night. And when I questioned why I couldn't just bunk down with my own unit, he just chuckled and replied, "Kid, magic users get the royal treatment wherever they go." It felt pretty sketchy to me. Those guys are sharing packed tents, while I get the penthouse suite. But I ended up tagging along anyway. The main caster tent was packed with kids my own age. Most of them took one quick look at my basic peasant clothes and immediately checked out. A few strolled over, though, including a brown-haired guy who asked about my element. I replied, Earth. Cue the collective wave of pity eyes. Honestly, I'm so used to that look by now it barely registers. Then I mentioned I'd been assigned to the vanguards, specifically infantry, squad 37, and that pity instantly upgraded to full-blown funeral arrangements. Several people actually started asking where my family lived, just so they could check on my relatives after I bit the dust. These guys were straight up mourning me in advance. Thanks, team. That really pumps up my confidence. Suddenly, the whole tent illuminated as if some god hit a light switch. Conversations died down, and everyone bowed toward the entrance. I immediately did the same, because when 300 people bow, you bow, and strolled an old man with white hair, sporting a golden robe, radiating a soft, white glow. He looked like a holy saint who had accidentally wandered into summer camp. My brain instantly connected the dots. Master Hood, the legendary light archmage. This 73-year-old icon just casually walked in and told us, "Chill out, kids. Back when I was your age, I hadn't even seen a battlefield yet." Then he offered to take questions about magic, patiently breaking down every single amateur inquiry like the most overpowered tutor on earth. Mustering up every ounce of courage I had, I stepped up during a lull and politely asked, "Sir, I want to study the ancient magic language, but I lack the proper materials." The tent went dead silent. Everyone stared at me like I just asked God for homework help. Master had glanced at my worn-out clothes, gave a soft sigh, and asked, "Does anyone have an ancient magic language lexicon they can lend this young man?" 15. Hands flew up, all holding the exact same book. I stood there completely frozen by the sheer volume of reference books being shoved in my face. The brown-haired kid, his name was Eerie, thrust his copy into my hands and said, "It's yours. I can't believe you actually asked Master Hood that." He explained that for most sorcerers, there are only a few spells per element at tiers 1 and 2, so nobody really needs a reference book. What would anyone even look up past 3 spells? I recalled the dozens of pages of novice incantations in my hidden grimoire and mumbled, seeking more knowledge. Eerie patted my shoulder like a buddy offering comfort at a wake, insisting I drop the books and focus on meditation. Since the embedded sorcerer mortality rate in frontline units tops 60%, that's the same warning Andre gave. Seems everyone figures I'm a goner. Fantastic. Right then, Master Hood strolled straight toward me to inquire about my assignment. When I mentioned Vanguard Infantry, Squad 37, his expression shifted instantly. He muttered, "Expect a visit from me tomorrow." Once he walked away, Eerie filled me in on what happened. Master Hood is a softie who can't stand seeing clueless rookies deployed straight to the front lines as meat shields. So he hands out custom, low-tier enchanted gear. Holy magic centers around curative buffs, purging ailments, and full-on resurrection, making his parting gifts essentially customized stay-alive care packages. And apparently, my incredibly naive Vocabulary inquiry caught his attention. I literally speed ran, earning his pity. By morning, Hood arrived at our platoon's quarters. He noted that he'd reviewed my records, discovering I possessed far more power than expected. My mood plummeted. Maybe being overly capable meant missing out on the freebies. Instead, he asked about my Tier 1 spell capacity. I answered him completely honestly. 24, increasing by roughly 1 every 3 days. His jaw dropped. The documentation only listed 10. So, replacing the standard restoratives he originally brought along. He pressed an exquisite silver necklace into my palm. His demeanor remained serene, but his claim was mind-blowing. This holds a single charge of 5th-tier divine restoration. It instantly mends every single trauma, barring ruptured hearts or missing limbs, and targets up to 50 individuals at once. I just stood there, gripping what was pretty much a pocket-sized miracle, and totally forgot to express my gratitude. My brain completely short-circuited. Master Hood clapped my shoulder and remarked, "Earth mages aren't the most tragic cases in our realm. You could turn into one of our most brilliant rising stars. Best of luck. May the celestial light shield you." Then he strolled off like he hadn't just nonchalantly gifted a teenager a weapon of mass salvation. After freezing in place for way too long, I suddenly blurted out, "Wait, how do I operate this thing?" Too late. He vanished. I spent the remaining hours with my unit, getting briefed on the state of the war. The Lutab Duchy is essentially a broke, resource-starved peninsula that plunders our borders whenever their crops fail. Their genius, long-term plan to counter Masterhood constantly provoke minor border skirmishes. So his soft heart compels him to stay stuck on the front lines, treating casualties, rather than training to grow even more powerful. They literally turned his empathy against him, and now they've somehow manipulated 2 other realms into teaming up against us. Buddha. Later that night, inside my tent, I finally opened up the ancient magical lexicon and began decoding incantations from my hidden volume. What I uncovered completely blew my mind. Earth magic, the very element that everyone labels pointless and pathetic, actually possessed a massive vault of obscure defensive spells and unique traits that apparently nobody remembers since they've been buried by time. Serious, heavy-duty stuff. Things that would trigger total pandemonium if I deployed them out in the open, because some random nobody wielding forgotten primordial sorcery would spark inquiries. I really don't feel like answering. I committed it all to memory as my secret trump cards. But one specific incantation caught my eye, a single target. Offensive spell that looked just as simple to cast as Stoneskin. I muttered its name under my breath. Petrify organs. And yeah, it does precisely what you're thinking. Stoneskin hardens your outer body like a rock, while Petrify organs turns someone's insides into solid stone. Same school of magic, but a totally different vibe. Erie showed me how to trigger Hood's pendant. Just grip it and recite the spell along with Hood's name. Easy enough. I finally went to sleep feeling way better about my chances of survival than I had in weeks. The next morning, it was war. The cook informed me that the Lutab Duchy was rallying forces, and our unit was locked into the vanguard. He slammed a heavy hand on my shoulder and muttered, "It's on you, kid. No pressure." My game plan was airtight. Buff all 20 unarmored troops with Stoneskin. Exactly 2 hours before the clash. Meditate to completely refill my mana during formation, and head into the fray with a fully loaded bank of 25 spell charges. When the war horns blew and the front lines collided, it became absolute pandemonium. Blades flashing, arrows pouring down from the sky like furious rain, and offensive spells bursting everywhere. Men were dropping by the second, but my squad? 0 casualties. Stoneskin was doing its thing beautifully. But then, the enemy deployed their ace in the hole. A massive 20-meter wheeled siege tower, reinforced with anti-magic stones that completely nullified every single hex thrown at it. Stationed inside were sorcerers raining down devastating salvos onto our ranks. Our mage corps concentrated all their firepower on it, but nothing bit. The magic simply dissolved upon impact. We were getting absolutely hammered. Suddenly, Master Hood materialized in the sky with wings of light, conjuring a colossal barrier over our entire battalion. Yet even he couldn't manage to take down that tower. Light magic just lacks that raw, destructive impact. And those anti-magic stones absorbed it all. Total stalemate. That tower just kept rolling forward. Then a crazy thought hit me. So dumb it was brilliant. Sure, the fortress is immune to magic, and those wizards inside are totally shielded too. But you know what isn't immune to spells? The actual dirt it's sitting on. I cast Quicksand and a 40. meter chasm ripped wide open right beneath the structure. That massive 20-meter building, along with the surrounding troops, just plunged right in. Down it went like a sinking ship. A few sorcerers managed to fly clear, but they were instantly skewered with arrows by our longbowmen. The Lutab forces panicked, sounding the horn for full retreat. Hood lowered his guard and cast a blessing on our army, and we went on a full-on pursuit. Now, that's when things got real scary. Their commander, a powerful telepathic mage named Robert, was scouting the battlefield through a bird's vision. He spotted exactly who swallowed up his prize tower. Gazing at a cloaked figure, he commanded, "Take out that geomancer." The hitman charged in on horseback, leaped off, and began weaving through the chaotic front line, using some crazy kind of supernatural footwork, gaining ground on me with terrifying speed. I saw him rushing dead straight at me, holding up a hand crossbow coated in venom. So I started incanting. He raised his arm to fire. I finished the phrase, and a sudden agony hit his chest as he dropped dead. Organic petrification. Baby, you don't even need to bypass plate armor when you can literally transform a guy's beating heart into solid stone from within. Welcome to Earth magic. The supposedly pointless element just flattened a top-tier assassin with one spell. We took the day like an absolute blowout victory. Yet despite such a massive win, the Vanguard unit suffered over a 30% casualty rate. Fellow soldiers I was laughing with just yesterday were gone. But over in Squad 37, every single one of us made it back alive. Captain Cook locked me in a bear hug so fierce. I honestly thought my stone skin was going to shatter. Just then, a runner arrived and ordered Cook and me to report straight to HQ. Man, whenever the top brass sumps a rookie, you're either getting a medal or a body bag. We stepped inside, and the command tent was crammed with veteran officers and some serious high-ranking majors. Ackerman, the Southern Front commander, was present, and Master Hood was right there, too. This whole situation was easily about 17 levels above my pay grade. Ackerman stood up and announced that the Leto Duchy was retreating along every sector. Instantly, the tent erupted in cheers. But then, he laid out the specifics. Their mid-to-high tier mages were practically wiped out. Their ultimate trump card, the Magic Siege Tower, was completely wrecked, and the second-in-command of their hit squads, Duke, the Storm of Poison Needles, was confirmed dead. Every single bit of this led right back to one guy. He pointed my way and declared I'd be receiving the Cree gold medal. Suddenly, every single pair of eyes locked onto me like heat-seeking missiles. A mage clad in deep crimson robes immediately demanded, "Who trained this kid? How can a low-level mage cast quicksand at 8 times its standard distance?" "Master." Hood smoothly stepped in, explaining that I don't have a master. I'm just a drafted country boy with an affinity for earth magic, who happens to be mind-blowingly gifted. He made it clear that I managed to cast quicksand at 4 times its usual range all by myself, and his own light barrier simply doubled that effect. So, technically, I'm only 4 times overpowered. Not 8, just 4 times. Totally casual. Right then, the madness started. Red Robes got hyped and vowed that he would personally sponsor me for the Imperial Royal Academy of Magic. Before I could even process what was happening, a mage in blue robes chuckled, remarking, "Cut the noble act, guys. We all know you're just trying to recruit him for your own crew. An Earth mage at the Royal Academy? We know how that plays out. I reckon he should head over to the Imperial Elemental Magic Academy instead," he added. Everyone cracked up right then because Blue Robe literally taught classes at that very school. Even more sorcerers chimed in, each selflessly putting me forward for their own departments. I found myself right in the middle of a school turf war, without having uttered a single word. Then Master Hood chimed in, and the entire room went dead silent. My personal recommendation is the Imperial Magic Research Institute. Jaws hit the floor. The research hub is where mid-tier mages and higher gather to craft new spells. It's pretty much the PhD equivalent of this realm. And honestly, I haven't even finished kindergarten yet. One daring wizard politely noted that a top medal doesn't automatically qualify someone for the Institute, suggesting that Hood might be hyping me up a bit too much. Right then, Hood pulled out his ultimate ace. He faced me directly and inquired, "Mind explaining to everyone how you took down Duke?" The assassination Vice Commander feared as the poison needle storm. The room froze instantly. Nobody realized I was the one. They had discovered Duke's corpse, out on the field with absolutely no wounds, figuring it was, I don't know, a sudden stroke or just bad luck. Heck, even Captain Cook was clueless, and he was standing right beside me during the clash. Hood grinned and broke it down. He commands a holy light spell that essentially Lets him play back combat events like a security tape. He had witnessed the whole ordeal. He saw the killer ambush me. And he saw that same killer drop dead right before me. And now, he wanted me to reveal how I survived that trap. My truth was right on the verge of slipping out. No way could I spill the beans about the magical grimoire. So I cooked up the most believable fib of my entire life, spanning both realms. I claimed, I stumbled upon a quirk, if you drag out the final syllable of the stone. Skin incantation, holding it longer and longer. The hardening effect penetrates way deeper into the body. Surface-level calcification usually hits a wall, so I figured if you force it past that threshold, the spell would shift its target to the inner organs instead. So I gave it a shot. The crowd digested this. And then, out of nowhere, everyone collectively lost their minds. I had literally just told them I created a totally new offensive spell simply by playing around with addiction of a basic, entry-level shield charm. A tier 1 spell that turns a target's innards to boulders from the inside out, requiring 0 contact, leaving 0 external scars, and with no known counter. And since it's technically categorized as level 1, pretty much any novice wizard or battle mage could master it. The wizard's perception flipped from "this kid has potential" to "this kid is a lethal weapon" in about 3 seconds flat. Ackerman dispatched a sentry to inspect Duke's corpse. The guard returned pale as a ghost and announced, "Every single one of his internal organs has turned to stone, and they're disintegrating right now. Total, utter chaos." Every single spellcaster in that pavilion gazed at me with a mix of deep reverence and sheer terror. All of a sudden, Hood vouching for me to join the academy didn't sound like such a wild proposition anymore. A teenager who reconstructs Lost assault magic just from playing with vocal inflections? Yeah, that's definitely Research Institute caliber. Hood grinned, remarking, "My original hope was for you to take decades to mature into someone like the Earth Sovereign, shaping mystical landscapes to defend our borders. I never anticipated you making such waves. This early on, I have 0 clue who this Earth Sovereign guy is, but he definitely sounds like some kind of tectonic superhero. So they're matching me up with him? Huh? Totally chill." That's when Commander Ackerman, acting like the ultimate realist soldier, chimed in. "Word on this incantation will get out eventually. Let's drill it into every single Earth mage on hand, and use it to hunt down those retreating Leto units before they make a clean break." Just like that, over one single morning, I went from a dead man walking in the ranks to a gold medal winner. The prize of an academic bidding war. The creator of a groundbreaking execution spell, and potentially the next Earth King. Meanwhile, my uni buddies back home couldn't even land a basic internship. Commander Ackerman's strategy was fiercely ambitious. Deploy a hit squad to intercept the retreating Leto bulk forces before they slipped away. The crew totaled 49 people, 3 top-tier captains, handling cavalry, assassination, and reconnaissance, each leading 10 specially chosen troops. Throw in a veteran wind mage named Murphy. 15 Earth mages, and yours truly. Murphy would trigger a mass velocity buff, allowing us to overtake the fleeing enemy army. Then, the Earth mages would deploy my brand new Organ Petrifink curse to take out their commanding officers and elite combatants, faced with calcified internal organs. Even high-rank fighters and mid-tier sorcerers dropped on the spot. Simple, clean, and terrifying. Those 15 Earth mages crowded around me for a crash course on how to slaughter targets by turning their insides to stone. Teaching a lethal hex to total strangers definitely wasn't on my college bucket list. Yet here we are, right before launch. Masterhood soared up into the air and fired a blinding flash of light magic along our intended path, blinding every bird in the vicinity. Why birds, you ask? Because Robert, the enemy psychic mage, uses creatures as organic spy drones. Pretty smart counter-move. We saddled up and headed out. As we sprinted across the landscape, I couldn't help but marvel at how crazy adaptable light magic is. Healing, barriers, buffs, anti-spy, bird flashbangs, you name it. The only real drawback is its weak offense. But from what Ares says, the ultimate forbidden light spell is supposedly the most devastating AoE attack in all of magical history. Granted, no one has pulled that off in centuries, which is precisely why Leto constantly raids our borders year after year, just to ensure Hood never gets a moment to master it. They straight up built their entire military strategy around keeping one old guy too swamped to practice. Suddenly, the assassination captain ordered everyone to freeze. Instant danger, aho. Thousands of arrows showering from the woods on both flanks. The 3 captains and their elites batted away. The opening volley through sheer talent, and then Murphy, summoned a continuous gale force shield that intercepted the rest. We were totally safe inside a swirling vortex. But right then, Robert rolled up, on horseback with a pack of dark-clad killers, and his voice resonated right inside our minds. By some sort of telepathic broadcast charm. Taking out those animal scouts was useless anyway. Now, have fun with the new magic your gifted Earth Mage cooked up. 6 of our own Earth Mages began shrieking, their eyes glowing purple. They were totally brainwashed, and without hesitation, they started dropping organ petrify on everyone nearby, zeroing in on Murphy and me as their main targets. My very own spell was turned against us by our comrades. Robert had clearly caught me doing something fishy during the fight. Figured I had some sort of secret offensive spell. So he sowed mental seeds inside Earth Mages all over the field, utilizing bird droppings as the delivery method. Yeah, bird poop. He literally hexed birds to drop mind, controlling crap right onto our mages. This guy literally weaponized avian bowel movements. I can't emphasize enough how totally gross, yet brilliant this was. He used those 6 compromised wizards to spy on our entire ambush strategy, setting up a counter-ambush that we walked straight into. Then Murphy's wind shield began to give out, as the barrage of arrows kept raining down. Robert obviously didn't expect to take out Murphy, an elite mage capable of flight, but he 100% intended for us to be wiped out by our own magic. Talk about poetic justice from his point of view. But here's the twist he didn't see coming. Not a single one of those 6 possessed mages killed anybody. Their organ-petrifying curses completely missed. As total chaos broke loose, the other 9 Earth Mages, and I dropped flat on the dirt right at the front lines, and triggered a massive combined quicksand trap. Robert's horses sank, forcing his black-clad hitmen to ditch their stuck mounts and leap to safety. Robert himself grabbed onto a harness, hitched to 3 massive, white-headed eagles, and got yanked up into the air, looking like the world's most dramatic chopper evac. From up there, he watched his archer squads get blasted into the sky by Murphy's massive cyclone spell. He saw all 6 of his puppet mages get knocked clean out, while everyone else was completely untouched. Baffled and livid, he detonated the mental seeds inside those 6 controlled casters as a final, petty act of malice. We brought 6 corpses back to camp, blue veins popping, bleeding out of every single orifice on their faces, dead, wiped out from within by telepathic seeds, blowing up inside their skulls. Gazing at those bodies made my stomach churn. These are guys I'd literally just taught the petrify organs trick to mere hours ago. They were hyped to learn. Now they're dead and gone because some psycho used hexed bird droppings to hijack their brains. Back at base, Hood cast his light playback spell to scan the whole firefight like some arcane CCTV camera. Letting out a sigh, he noted Robert had perfected Mind Seed, a mental hex deployed through animal go-betweens. When Commander Ackerman questioned how exactly the curse was transmitted, Hood struggled to find a polite way to put it. He hesitated a few times, then just threw in the towel and laid it bare. Robert embeds the Mind Seed inside birds. The birds crap on people, and that crap carries the spell. That's the whole deal. The tent went dead silent. The looks on everyone's faces were priceless. A blend of pure dread, revulsion, and a weird sort of respect for the sheer ballsiness of a poop-driven brainwashing tactic. Hood looked a bit self-conscious about spelling it out so bluntly. But seriously, how else do you phrase it? The guy earned everyone's admiration for trading his dignity for total clarity. Then Hood locked eyes with me, wearing that knowing smirk, and dropped the one question I dreaded. How did you make those 6 brainwashed mages petrify organs attack completely useless? Did you whip up another brand new spell? Suddenly, every single eye in the tent snapped back to me, because apparently I can't last 5 minutes without becoming the absolute focus of a room, packed with people way more high-powered than myself. I had barely escaped a countertrap crafted solely to destroy me by turning my own magic against us via mind. Brainwashed the comrades infected via bird droppings. So now I'm stuck explaining how I blocked my own hex, without letting slip about my hidden cheat guide. Man, this world is just plain draining. Everyone was staring at me, waiting for a reply to Hood's query regarding how I managed to stop the mind-controlled wizard's organ-petrifying strikes. If I claimed it was a brand new incantation, they'd probably knight me right on the spot. But since I couldn't expose the magical grimoire either, I decided to stick to the facts, just leaving out the part where I actually picked it up. It's not some novel spell, I told them. It's just a basic tier 1 Earth spell, known as Earth Element Dissipation. You could practically hear the light bulbs snapping on inside every single mage's head. Earth Element Dissipation is a status buffer that grants the target immunity against all Tier 1 Earth magic consequences. The sole reason everyone forgot it even existed is that the only Tier 1 Earth spells anybody ever uses are Stone Skin and Rock Reinforcement, both helpful buffs meant for your own teammates. Why on earth would you want to block those? The magic was honestly so completely pointless that it vanished from memory entirely. But it hit me that because Petrify Organs is technically a Tier 1 spell too, Dissipation counters it like a charm. I had cast it over our whole vanguard as a safety measure before we set out, mostly because I'm paranoid, and paranoia keeps you alive. Hood then pressed me on where I found such a rare spell. And it's not like I could just say, oh, for my secret forbidden cheat guide. So instead, I passed the credit to someone who earned it. Morgan, the instructor at the Orco City Mage Guild Outpost. He always said that every spell has its perfect moment, and that no magic is ever truly worthless. I committed Earth Element Dissipation to memory from the guilds. Earth Magic Archives. Right after that, everyone started hyping up Morgan's brilliant way of teaching. The guys on the strike team practically wanted to worship the dude who saved their skins. Meanwhile, I'm just standing there cracking up inside, seeing as Morgan never actually taught me the spell. But whatever, he did back me up when no one else would. So now his cred just went through the roof. With the kingdom's top military brass. Don't mention it, Morgan. Take that as payback for the favor with interest. The mages in the tent were a bit bummed that Petrify Organs could be shut down by such a basic spell, though they quickly realized it works both ways. Earth Element Dissipation, once considered the most useless magic around, was suddenly vital, precisely because Petrify Organs was so lethal. Two forgotten trash tier spells had instantly become a perfect sword and shield combo, completely flipping battlefield tactics on their head. I literally caused a whole meta shift using bottom tier magic. Hood smiled and said something that was both super flattering and incredibly terrifying. Perhaps your out-of-the-box thinking is your ultimate gift. I've reconsidered sending you to the Institute. You belong on the front lines, where your adaptive strategies can yield even more surprises for us. The breakdown? You're way too useful to waste on school, so we're keeping you in the fight. Naturally, everyone was totally on board with that. Apparently, a person who can rewrite combat strategies on the fly is a lot rarer, and more prized than some magical prodigy or scholar. I'm so incredibly special that my prize is just more danger. I humbly explained that I was a nobody, who wasn't even a full-fledged apprentice yet, arguing that they were hyping me up too much. But yeah, no one bought that for a second. Out of nowhere, Hood dropped 3 total bombshells on me. First off, my official mage association insignia was en route, meaning I'd be registered as a low-ranked junior mage under his wing. Second, for developing battle mage strategies. In the Tier 1 combat magic setup, I was being granted the title of Quasi-Baron in the Crete Kingdom. Wait, I'm an aristocrat? I've been in this world for maybe 6 weeks, and I'm already part of the nobility. I must have looked completely brain dead because everyone inside the tent was stifling a laugh at my expense. They probably assumed the country bumpkin didn't grasp the royal peerage system, which was true. I had zero clue what a quasi-baron even was. Is it a big deal or the absolute bottom tier? Do I get property, a fortress, or a cool hat? No one bothered to clarify, and I was too shell-shocked to ask. Commander Ackerman in the flesh conducted my official knighthood, charging me to keep advancing the kingdom's arcane breakthroughs. I bowed, offering a suitably majestic response. It will forever be my distinct privilege to serve the kingdom of Crete. Ackerman gave an appreciative nod. He clearly saw right through my lack of courtly manners, but the raw earnestness hit the mark. Next, Ackerman briefed me on the strategy. Lutop is out of moves, so they'll launch one half-hearted push before pulling back completely. Once the southern theater is locked down, I'm transferring to Hood's Wizard Division, bound for the Western Front. 3 days later, Lutop acted precisely as Ackerman foresaw. It was a lukewarm, performative skirmish, while Hood kept blinding every single scout bird in the sky to stop any more crap-based brainwashing. The clash dragged on for half a day, with minimal losses on either side, before Luther completely backed out. With the South locked down, I went through 2 inductions, my mage badge and a quasi-baron title, back-to-back before hitting the road. Parting ways was tougher than I thought. Walker had to hold the southern line with the foot soldiers, while Erie got shipped off to a nearby boot camp, since his magic skills weren't quite cutting it yet. Those guys were my first genuine friends in this chaotic new world. Boarding the mage core carriage, I was mentally dealing with two problems: keeping up my intermediate meditation grind, and figuring out how to openly cast more spells from my forbidden grimoire without raising red flags. I needed a solid cover story for uncovering long-lost ancient magic, since the Morgan told me excuse only goes so far. Right then, realization hit me. Cetus had been deployed to the Western Front. I noticed myself grinning like a total dork. All of a sudden, the upcoming 3-day trek didn't feel so exhausting. Funny how that happens. The Mage Corps hauled ass at top speed, using group haste and energy-restoring enchantments to arrive at the Western Front in just 3 days. But a debriefing from Amanda, the Western commander, instantly made me frown. The Ross Kingdom's onslaught was far more brutal than anticipated. It made no sense, considering Crete and Ross were literally a single nation once. Ross broke away from Crete generations back, sharing profound historical bonds. No one could wrap their head around why a sister country would strike with such malice. Something was seriously off on the Western Front, and I got the vibe that my short-lived wartime being a hero was about to get way more chaotic. Hood and the top brass spent an entire day bickering over why the Ross Kingdom was even striking at us. And honestly, no one had a clue. So here's the quick backstory. Way back in year 132 of the Flame Era, the Ross Kingdom got totally fed up with handling elves to the north and Lutab raiders down south. Consequently, they sliced off their whole eastern territory and basically said, "Here, this is your problem now." That severed region became the Kingdom of Crete. Yep, my homeland. Ross stripped out all the good stuff beforehand, erected massive walls along the new boundary, and used us as a literal human shield buffer, promising temporary military backing while we found our footing. Crete still hands Ross a massive annual tribute, and even after Crete raised its own military, those payments never stopped. Therefore, raiding us makes absolutely zero sense for Ross. They're destroying their cash cow and security zone. It's pretty much like torching your own rental property. Yet there they were, going totally berserk across our western border. They sent in their elite royal First Knight Order, alongside their top-tier wind mage, Master Gaia. Lacking an equivalent archmage on the Western Front, our defenses were getting absolutely wrecked. The sole reason we hadn't completely shattered was due to Ross's own defensive walls and moats. Ironically, the ones built to keep us out were now bottlenecking their very own advance. They had literally blocked off the wrong side. Talk about a chef's kiss of tactical stupidity. Hood deduced from the incoming intel that Ross was deliberately hunting our spellcasters. They aimed to completely drain our magical fighting force. But here's the real kicker. Commander Amanda brought up that the enemy deployed a unique, enchanted siege unit. Hood immediately chimed in. Is it a moving tower packed with sorcerers? Amanda's jaw dropped. How did you guess that, Hood? The rest of us from the Southern Front just traded looks. Identical structures, same layout. Ross deployed 3 of them. Yet, Rost and Lutab supposedly share 0 official ties and don't even border one another. So how did 2 completely separate nations end up with the exact same classified weaponry? Some major shady business was definitely going down. When Amanda asked how we handled ours, Hood nonchalantly replied, "Oh, I smashed it to pieces thanks to a rookie teenage wizard we recently drafted." Amanda stared at me like I was some freak. "Welcome to my world, Commander." But then things got intense. He explained to Amanda that with Gaia in play, any upcoming clash meant he'd have to go all out, just to maintain the deadlock between the elite mages. Basically, he couldn't cover for me, while I quicksand those towers like before. We needed solid intelligence first. His plan was to infiltrate the hostile base, track the artillery, and hopefully wreck a couple prior to the next engagement. Amanda, who was turning out to be a pretty sharp tactician, pointed out that this approach seemed incredibly reckless. Hood just brushed it off. The situation out west was far worse than the south. No guts, no glory. So the strategy was set. Hood, our scout Captain Owen, and yours truly would creep past enemy lines after dark for a recon run. Just the 3 of us infiltrating an entire military encampment protected by a high-tier sorcerer. Just another typical Tuesday. Around midnight, Owen, who was riding this strange sort of beast, pulled me right onto the saddle with him, and we bolted straight toward the Ross position. Hood soared right above us on his nimble wings, blending perfectly into the pitch-black sky. Just as the enemy's outpost finally came into view, Hood caught sight of those 3 siege towers. Pure trouble. They were stationed right beside the main Rosmage hub, tucked way deep inside the absolute most heavily fortified section of their whole military layout. Reaching them felt like a total suicide mission, like trying to snatch treasure from the heart of a dragon's lair. But Hood, being classic Hood, figured that we're already here, and immediately began casting an incantation from above. A tiny dot of light flared up on the ground nearby, giving us the cue, so Owen and I leaped off our beast, and tightly squeezed our eyes shut like we were told. A gut feeling told me the next couple of seconds were going to be absolutely, blindingly bright. Scarcely a moment after closing our eyes, frantic screams started echoing from the enemy lines. We snapped them open and bolted toward the glowing mark on the dirt, realizing Hood had just totally blinded every single night watchmen across the entire Rose encampment with that radiant burst. Troops were stumbling out of their tents half-naked, shielding their eyes and crashing right into one another. Complete pandemonium, just absolute poetry. Meanwhile, high up, Hood was having a little reunion with his old school buddy, the Wind Archmage Gaia, though instead of "Hey there, pal, it's been ages," the vibe was more like, "Why the hell are you raiding us?" Gaia's defense was laughably corporate and structured. Their intel division estimated that Kree's power was growing too rapidly and required some rebalancing. Plain English? We became strong enough to actually defend ourselves, so they want to crush us before the winter season, when the elves halt their annual scheduled assault, and our own fire archmage, Ryan, would be around to back us up. Hood called it exactly what it was. Rose basically wants to keep us powerless, so we can stay their frontline shields forever. Gaia didn't bother denying it, just shrugged and muttered, "You and I just neutralize each other, so the Leru Kingdom can do the heavy lifting." Cold. Stone cold. And get this, the guy was Hood's old school buddy. But while those two archmages were having their dramatic face-off in the sky, Owen and I were pulling off the real operation. We changed into poached Ross uniforms and sneaked straight into the camp. While everyone was blinded and freaking out, Owen slipped through the mayhem like a phantom. Any guard who caught a glimpse of US got dropped before they could even blink. The guy was terrifyingly elite at his job. We trailed Hood's guiding light beacon straight to the 3 siege towers. 0 sentries. They'd all been flash-blinded. I secured the sweet spot. Down 2 of CD's Earth Element Spirit Drafts. Grabbed Hood's Light Blessing, relic to extend my range, and cast 3 quicksand hexes back-to-back. 1 for each tower. Down they went. All 3 of those 20-meter structures got sucked into the dirt like they never even existed. Nothing remained but trio of swirling sand vortices. Owen hoisted me onto his back, and we hauled ass out of there. Behind us, shrieks, utter chaos, and the sound of an entire war campaign, disintegrating directly into a crater. Way up in the air, Gaia glanced down, saw his precious trio of towers had gone poof, and his look flipped from smooth politician to total rage. He growled at Hood, "You've turned into a crafty old bastard." Hood just stroked his beard and smirked. "Guess your pack with Luther wasn't that tight. They lost their structure too and gave you no heads up. Looks like we're square." Gaia ran the numbers and knew he was totally done for. Those 3 towers plus himself likely would have crushed Hood. Just a single tower was enough to trap Hood there. Yet with 0 towers remaining, Hood could easily keep Gaia locked in a permanent standoff. Provided Creek managed to delay them until wintertime, the elves would enter hibernation. That meant Ryan would be released from a northern front, and whichever battle line he reinforced next would shatter the whole 3-kingdom coalition. Ross's master plan was completely falling to pieces, leaving them wasting funds, troops, and political leverage for absolutely nothing. Hood casually proposed a truce, fuming Gaia so much he was left speechless. Wind sorcery boasts massive area of effect spells, but lacks anything capable of taking down an elite spellcaster one-on-one. Consequently, neither archmage could best the other. A total deadlock. Hood then guided us back to camp, strolled into the main briefing tent, and nonchalantly declared, "Flawless victory. All 3 towers are history." The entire tent erupted in celebration. Commander Amanda presented gold medals to Owen, and me right then and there. That marks my 2nd gold medal. I'm turning into quite the celebrated military hero, even though I still can't wrap my head around the hierarchy of this particular realm. Anyway, he beamed at me with pride, giving me a brief moment of comfort. Then he added, "I have just one final task for you." That cozy feeling vanished instantly. I noticed his grin and glanced at the staff officers around the room who were stifling giggles. A wave of pure dread began to creep over me. The Western Front has stabilized, so I'll remain posted here to check Gaia. But you must deploy to the Eastern Front post-haste. The Leru Kingdom likely deployed siege structures as well. You catch my drift? My throat tightened up. He was sending me entirely solo too. Yet another battlefield to wreck more towers solo. No high-tier wizard covering my back. Just me, my quicksand, and whatever raw survival skills I could scrape together. Hood sweetened the deal. I'll gear you up with enchanted items, and if you pull this off, I'll ask the king to elevate you to a lower baron. An actual status upgrade? Sweet. Assuming I survive. Then he dangled the ultimate carrot. If you demolish all of Luro's siege towers, I'll personally bestow upon you the exclusive mage title of Ground Sinker. Hardly any wizards in history have locked down a unique title. Ground Sinker. So my official job description is now straight up. The dude who drops stuff into holes. I've been in this world for less than 2 months, and I've already scored a noble title, 2 gold medals, a specialized combat spell named after my own style, and now they want to hand me a legendary sorcerer moniker. All I gotta do is make it through a solo op, on the 3rd active front of a multi-front war, minus my powerhouse wizard guardian angel, facing an entire kingdom that absolutely wants me dead. I just stood there with my jaw on the floor, completely unable to figure out whether I was the luckiest or most cursed person alive in this whole place. Turns out, Ground Sinker was entirely Hood's own gag. The whole headquarters tent cracked up laughing the second I stepped out. I could hear them right through the canvas. Turns out Hood gave me a ridiculous title on purpose, partly to hype up my name among the apprentice mages, and partly as a diversion to mask my true worth. Behind the scenes, Commander Amanda had already quietly put me on the kingdom's official VIP protection list, right alongside my family and friends back home. Of course, I had zero clue about any of this back then. I was way too caught up in my own embarrassment. I bolted back to the sorcerer camp to pack up, hoping I could at least catch Seti's to say goodbye, since she was headed out to the Western Front. But we were stationed in different tents, so she was nowhere to be found. So instead, I hopped into my fancy private carriage, feeling a slight pang of regret, and started meditating. Looks like the romance subplot is on hold again. Meanwhile, and I only found out about this much later, Gaia was absolutely losing his mind over at the raw space. The second that intel brief landed on his desk, he realized that both the Southern and Western battle lines had been completely wrecked by the exact same teenage Earth Mage conscript. I bet his immediate reaction was to straight up flip a table. He mobilized every single undercover spy, and sleeper agent Rost had managed to plan inside Creed. He even sent out his elite hitman, a high-speed assassin known as Flash Shadow Hulk. On top of that, he dispatched a crew to my hometown to dig up dirt, to use against my family. Thankfully, they'd already been placed under protection. The guy essentially declared a one-man war against a single 17-year-old who happens to throw mud spells. I was totally in the dark. I was just chilling in my carriage with my eyes shut, peacefully zoning out, utterly oblivious to the fact that half a kingdom's spy network had just been greenlit to take me off the map. Strike 1, nightfall, thick woods. A squad of pyromancers, hiding up in the canopy, unleashed flame explosion. A tier 5 spell, straight at my ride. The entire forest lit up like a massive bonfire. I braced myself for impact, waiting to die, but nothing happened. The carriage just gave a little nudge, as if someone had barely flicked it. Tier 5 magic, brushed off like a minor bug bite. Turns out Hood had hooked me up at the ride, stacked with enough defensive wards to withstand anything. Built to endure a mini-war, the pyromancers watched their top spell bounce right off like a toy dart, and bailed immediately. Wise move. Round 2. The path was blocked by fallen timber, with a crew of masked hitmen waiting, blades drawn. Peeking my head out of the coach, I spotted the welcome party and froze in sheer terror. These guys weren't rookies. Every single one of them moved like a pro killer. I was just about to incant an organ-freezing curse when my driver beat me to the punch. He cast a spell, and every thug, along with the blocked-up trees, got hurled into orbit by a massive cyclone. They came crashing back down, and, well, let's just say gravity remains undefeated. Master Murphy? I recognized that voice and his trademark, Grand Hurricane. My driver all along was the elite wind mage, who commanded our raid squad on the southern front lines. He'd been playing the part of my coachman the whole time. Looking back at me, he smirked and joked. Not a bad driver. Huh, I practically had a heart attack. I insisted that he take the seat inside while I took the reins, but he ordered me to get back in the cabin and keep up my meditation. Boosting your mana is all that matters right now. Don't forget your duty, Continent Sinker Luo How. Honestly, whenever someone utters that title, a tiny piece of my soul withers away. For 10 days, Murphy drove while I meditated in the back. His haste enchantments kept our pace blistering. Yet the hits just kept on coming. Over 20 different ambush parties. Fire wielders, duelists, marksmen, and assassins. Ross threw absolutely everything at us. Murphy brushed them off like gnats. I had no clue Kree harbored so many enemy operatives within its borders. Ross had clearly been embedding sleeper cells for generations. At long last, the Eastern Front outpost came into view. Almost there, but yet another crew of dark-clad hitmen cut off the path, and this time they brought actual sorcerers along. Murphy scowled, completely fed up with this nonsense. He began incanting, "Grand Tornado." Suddenly, a blurry figure slipped up behind him. Murphy double-bent in pure agony, yet managed to force out the final word of his incantation. The gale erupted, sending the killers flying everywhere. But right after, he tumbled straight off the wagon. He wiped out hard, and my heart totally skipped a beat. Murphy, the guy who'd been watching over me unseen for 10 whole days, who'd single-handedly wiped out 20 hit squads without even breaking a sweat, the same one masquerading as a driver, just so a kid could practice magic in peace, was now slumped on the dirt. Right behind me, bleeding from his back, and amidst all that crazy commotion, the mysterious attacker had vanished in a thin air. Flash Shadow Hulk had finally tracked us down. He just stood there over Murphy's passed-out body, loitering like a classic cinematic bad guy enjoying the view. He started gloating because typical villain behavior, right? Bragging about his custom blade, infused with a level 10 wind, counter-magic spell, and smeared with venom from a mountain twin-tailed scorpion. Supposedly, it guarantees 3 full days of pure torture before you kick the bucket. He mockingly noted that Murphy could always pray for Hood to revive him, assuming he doesn't mind losing a tenth of his max mana pool. Wow, how incredibly kind of him. Then he faced my ride and called out, "Don't even bother with those basic earth stunts, kid. Check out this chain. It's a novice spell-shattering amulet. It deflects 10 debuffs ranked level 2 or lower. Whatever gimmicks you've got, stone skin, calcify organs, you name it, gets instantly snuffed out. I prepped explicitly to shut you down." He began strolling toward me, clearly milking the moment. The guy really wanted to take his sweet time offing the punk, who had completely derailed 2 entire war fronts. I yanked back the carriage curtain, stared him right in the face, and began incanting. He smirked. "Bring it on, kid. Give your little hexes a shot. This amulet will just devour them all." Honestly, he was right about the magic he actually knew of. Stone skin, countered. Petrify organs, shut down. Virtually every status debuff targeting someone's physical form, totally blocked. But right then, a massive blast of grit smacked him dead in the face out of nowhere. It wasn't a curse, and it wasn't targeting his internals. It was just basic, ordinary sand, guided by magic, forcing its way right into his nostrils, ears, mouth, and airways. No matter how fast he tried to duck, the dust cloud tracked him flawlessly, clogging up his head like the most aggressive supernatural dust bunny ever. He clawed at his throat, thrashing around, stumbling blindly until he finally dropped, choked to death by a level 2 forgotten, offensive spell that literally nobody in this world even remembers anymore. That high-end anti-magic amulet of his, completely useless. It was built strictly to repel spells messing with your body. This particular magic didn't touch his body. It just packed his lungs with dirt. Loophole exploited. Assassin neutralized. Massive shout-out to that secret grimoire. 4 packing spells so incredibly niche that even the guys trying to counter me can't prep for them. I hopped down and checked on Murphy. Unconscious, poisoned, still breathing, but slipping away. I hauled him into the wagon, then stripped anything valuable off Hulk's dead body, including that pricey necklace. I quicksand the corpse into total oblivion and steered the carriage toward the Eastern Front myself. Over at the Eastern Camp, Commander Lehman and a crowd of officers stood huddled around Murphy, looking completely clueless. That scorpion venom was totally out of our league. An elite mage frantically detailed the massive trap Rost had set. Sea Hood relies on resurrection magic, which permanently drains a massive chunk of his maximum mana. Between reviving whole squads of fallen soldiers and bringing back key individuals, like high-tier mages such as Murphy, they were actively trying to nerf Hood below super mage level. If he slipped down to a senior mage, he'd no longer be able to counter Gaia. Our whole war plan completely depended on keeping Hood powerful enough to hold Gaia at bay. But Rost was deliberately and steadily bleeding away his strength. A nature specialist, Lady Isha, used nature's sleep on Murphy to stall the venom, giving us maybe 10 more days tops. Lemon fired off an urgent, classified note to Hood scouting for a cure, and then we got right down to business. The Eastern Front was facing a single siege tower, but the Leroy Kingdom had received intel from Rost regarding how I wrecked the previous 4. They'd re-engineered it. The structure was completely walled off by a heavy cavalry division, so tightly packed you couldn't even see past them, backed by elite sentries underneath, and their entire mage corps covering them from above. Sneaking into quicksand casting range was pretty much a suicide mission. Lehman pressed me for options, so I stated the obvious. I've got to get close enough to trigger the quicksand, and that's a no-go with that massive cavalry wall blocking the path. Lehman looked visibly let down while I stared at the floor, weighing every single strategy in my head. Then it clicked. How many Earth mages, ranked above junior level, are stationed on the Eastern Front? The tally? 12. All of the mid-junior tier or above. Lehman had them gathered up within minutes. I faced the dozen Earth mages standing ready at attention, and threw out a question that left every last one of them completely baffled. Do any of you guys actually know the rock armor spell? A dozen pairs of eyes stared blankly back at me. I could literally hear the gears turning in their heads. What's this kid cooking up now? Honestly, good question. What am I planning? Something completely unhinged, probably. But hey, that seems to be my whole brand in this world. Taking totally overlooked, useless Earth magic and reshaping it into something that makes generals weep with joy and enemies cry out in pure terror. Ground Sinker Luo, how reporting for duty, sir, unfortunately. The 12 Earth mages nodded in unison. They all knew rock armor. It's just a basic Tier 2 spell that encases a target inside a heavy, solid stone casing. Pretty much everyone considers it total trash compared to stone. Seikin, since the plating is so massive, it pretty much turns you into a literal statue. It's like wearing a car. Nobody ever uses it, which is exactly why I wanted it. I crunched the numbers. 12 mages plus myself equals a total mana capacity for roughly 300 rock armor spells. Next, I questioned Commander Lehman regarding the enemy's tactical formation. He gestured toward the map table. Infantry out front, heavy cavalry boxing in the siege tower to protect it, assassin guards stationed underneath, and light horse archers covering the flanks. Roughly 1,000 heavy cavalrymen in total. That was half of the Leroy Kingdom's entire arsenal of full-plate armor, and they were all betting everything on guarding that tower. Then I asked about our own assassination squad, the captain of the Eastern Front's infiltration unit. Chris looked instantly insulted by the query. Are you doubting our capabilities? We've been surviving brutal combat for years, while Leroy's assassins have just been lounging in barracks getting soft. Lehman backed his claim. Chris had literally infiltrated deep into Elven territory and eliminated Elven scouts right on their own home soil. The guy was an absolute legend. I stared at him with pure respect, and he immediately softened up toward me. Good old flattery, the ultimate social lubricant. I pitched my strategy, and after 30 minutes of debating, every single person inside looked at me with a whole new level of respect. Lehman gave me a hearty slap on the back and chuckled. Forget being a mage. You seriously need to be a military strategist. Lady Isha shut that down real quick. He literally crafts brand new spells, reinvents garbage magic into game-changing battlefield tactics, and boasts a natural 4 times amplification factor. Don't you dare try poaching him from the Mage Association. Just like that, Lehman's attempt at recruiting me was dead in the water. Next morning, D-Day, both armies drew their lines. Phase 1. Chris and his top-tier assassins, suited up in standard infantry gear, completely blending into the massive crowd of foot soldiers. My 12 Earth mages and I rocked the exact same outfit, tucked away right behind them. The Larok siege towers unleashed all their payloads onto our rear magic division. I mean, why waste high-grade magical artillery on worthless grunts? Which was precisely my play. To them, we were invisible. Just expendable cannon fodder, not worth a shot. Phase 2. Chris's crew sliced through the Larok infantry like a hot knife through butter. Crete's forces are honestly built differently after enduring decades of nonstop war. Larok's front lines completely melted away. Yet, their heavy cavalry held their ground, behind a pile of infantry corpses waiting calmly. They weren't sweating it. They had 1,000 iron walls on horseback ready to go. Phase 3. My cue. Chris gave a nod, and his assassins fanned out, forming a defensive perimeter around our Earth Mage unit. All 12 casters began chanting in perfect unison, "Rock armor." That totally useless spell that weighs you down so much you can't move? Yeah, we cast it straight onto the enemy's lead heavy cavalry. Just picture it. These fellas were already decked out in full plate, armor atop their war horses. Then we piled another massive layer of rock right on top. The mount shrieked and buckled under that insane amount of weight. The riders got pancaked directly into their saddles, pinned down like beetles flipped onto their backs. 1,000-strong wall of cavalry turned into a 1,000-strong speed bump in mere seconds. Our killers leaped right over the twitching heap of immobilized stone and metal soldiers, smashing through to the siege tower. Luro, finally, spotted us and aimed the tower's heavy firepower our way. Their ground executioners started closing in too. I grabbed Hood's magical amulet, shouted the trigger phrase, and a glowing shield dome popped up over our whole squad, deflecting everything the tower threw at us. It wouldn't last long, though. This was a single-use item. So I bolted toward the structure under Chris's cover and triggered quicksand. Boom! Tower number 5 of my career gone, swallowed by the dirt like it never even existed. We wheeled around and ran. Job done. Time to celebrate. Suddenly, 2 identical black-clad riders charged straight out of the Luro ranks. The Ba brothers, Luro's elite assassination captain and vice captain twins. They raised their crossbows and began picking off our retreating operatives with venomous bolts. Every single shot threaded the narrowest seams in the light armor with surgical accuracy. 7 or 8 of Chris's best fell in an instant. Chris glanced back, saw the twins gaining ground, and ordered the rest of the crew to keep moving. He held the line entirely alone, swatting away incoming bolts with his blade, like some kind of badass action movie hero. But he knew the math. 1 against 2, facing foes who were custom-made to fight as a duo. Alone, he outmatched either twin, but together, they had him cornered. And kicker is the Ba brothers had already set up earth element dissipation on themselves. My own counter magic flipped on me. They knew about petrify organs, and they'd blocked it beforehand. These guys were totally ready. Chris unsheathed his blade, the twins got down, and somewhere behind me, fleeing for dear life with the rest of the crew, it hit me. The man safeguarding me was going to die. Fighting a losing war, just let me get away. This world just keeps tossing me heroes who throw down their lives for the objective, while I'm stuck being the objective. The Ba brothers pulled their deep blue daggers and closed in to finish Captain Chris off. He knew he was screwed 2-on-1, but was ready to die to buy us a head start. But here's the deal. Nobody ordered me to keep running. I halted. Everyone froze right with me, and I unleashed my hidden sand suffocation spell. Straight at one twin. One bro caught a faceful of enchanted sand, forcing its way into every single airway. The other brother hesitated for a split second, and a split second is a lifetime. Against the guy called the Ghost Wolf King, Chris sliced his neck open in one clean swipe. The choked-up twin was finished half a minute later, thrashing on the dirt, until his lungs basically turned into a sandcastle. Chris spun around, spotting me standing there with a whole unit backing me up. Not a single soul had bolted. He barked at us to fall back. Voice breaking just a bit, I let it slide. With their siege tower went down, with their magic core shattered, and the Ba brothers finished. The Liero kingdom totally fell apart. Our troops let loose months of bottled-up rage, and completely steamrolled right through them. We busted through 3 lines of defense, and won back 2/3 of our captured land. In just one day, that same night, Commander Lehman hosted a victory banquet. Every single bit of meat and fruit left in. Our reserves was whipped up and split evenly. The officers got the exact same rations as the grunts. I gave an approving nod. This kingdom seriously knows how to run its military. Lehman toasted with a cup of water, because apparently, even at a massive victory bash, the army sticks strictly to water. Anyway, I scored my 3rd gold medal, along with the formal ground sinker title. I walked up, took the award, and headed straight back to my spot without making eye contact, mostly because I could tell the whole room was bursting to laugh. That ridiculous title is going to stick with me forever. By the following morning, the vibe completely changed. Luro had pulled back during the night, but they were digging in at the border and calling for backup. They were bracing themselves for a long, grinding war, meaning Rost wouldn't be leaving either. 2 active fronts, maybe 3 if Lutab made another gutsy move, dragging things out, right up until winter, when the elves would finally halt their annual scheduled invasion, allowing that elite fire mage Ryan to come reinforce us. That's when Lehman presented me with an option. Head to the capital ahead of schedule to join a magic academy, or stay on the front lines and keep grinding. 2 choices, safety and schooling, or peril and leveling up. Every mage, officer, and private inside that tent was staring at me, waiting. I paused away, it really molded over. That hidden grimoire was mine. I'd completely nailed mid-tier meditation too, but I was totally lacking actual battlefield experience. Those raw instincts for casting on the fly, and that specific grit, you only get from constantly cheating death. So I told them, this war isn't over yet. Skip the VIP treatment. I'm sticking around too. Buff as many frontliners with stone skin as possible. Keep plenty of our guys alive, and level up my skills in the fray. The whole crowd cheered, hyping up how loyal and selfless I was, a true credit to Masterhood's mentoring. I blushed hard, though, because honestly part of my choice was due to the Magic Academy forcing everyone to sit through stuffy aristocratic etiquette, the history of magic across the realms, and holy scriptures regarding a ton of different gods. That sounded way worse than actual combat. A red-robed pyromancer backed this up, basically, reassuring me that I'd made the right call. Since school life is just a soul-crushing bureaucratic mess, I spent the following 6 months floating between the eastern and southern conflict zones. Captain Chris trained me in close combat himself, coaching me until I could hold my ground against standard operatives from the Assassination Corps. My pool of mana kept growing, while organ petrifaction and stone skin became my trademark moves on the field. The ground sinker moniker spread like wildfire through the ranks. Lutab and Liero attempted a couple of minor skirmishes, but we crushed them effortlessly every single time. Then, winter finally hit. The elves pulled back from the northern woods, and that's when the legendary Archmage Ryan arrived at the western front, riding high on a blazing phoenix. Ross took one look at some guy mounted on a bird, composed of literal flames, and immediately began packing up. Even so, they left behind a few hundred charred bodies during their retreat, simply because Ryan isn't big on walking away peacefully. Lutab and Liero got the memo and backed off too. The war was officially over, King Nelson VI proclaimed. Victory from the capital's central altar. The whole country went completely wild. The streets were packed with cheering. Citizens dressed to the nines, showering the returning troops with gifts. It honestly felt like a parade, a massive festival, and collective therapy all rolled into one. I marched into the capital alongside the Eastern Army, and I could barely recognize myself. The skinny college, shut-in who did nothing but binge. Anime a year ago was history. I was built broader, sharper, and if I'm being totally real, kind of hot now. An entire year of battle, meditation, and Chris's absolutely brutal training had completely remade me from the ground up. Stats check. I had reached mid-lower junior mage status. I could finally cast a level 3 spell. I'd officially picked up 2 new level 3 spells, Earthbind and Rock Explosion, thanks to the Earth mages on the Eastern Front. Plus, for secret, lost level 3 spells from my own book. Not too shabby for a guy whose basic starting kit was just hardening skin and reinforcing dirt. The royal award ceremony took place 3 days later, once all 3 fronts had arrived. King Nelson led a moment of silence for those we lost. Hood had pulled off a mass resurrection, permanently giving up a chunk of his max mana cap to bring back as many fallen soldiers as he could. But there was a limit to the count. The rest were laid to rest at Hero's tomb right outside the capital. Then came the decorations. The commander-in-chief, Duke Yalman, alongside both super mages, were awarded the Protector of the Nation title, the highest honor the kingdom bestows. The 3 front commanders and elite mages were presented with the Kret Rainbow Medal. And somehow, crazy as it is, I was part of that crowd too. My mind went totally blank approaching the main altar. The king, with his own hands, fastened the prismatic, jeweled honor on me, proclaiming to the whole city that I'd wrecked 5 siege towers across 3 separate sectors. The crowd went wild. I saluted, took the decoration, and secretly appraised the street value of those 7 colorful gems. Old habits die hard. At the palace feast later on, Chris and I snagged a secluded table and absolutely crushed every single plate within arm's length, like a 2-man competitive eating squad. He asked about my upcoming plans. I mentioned I'd likely enroll in a magic school, but needed to check on my dad beforehand. Chris got surprisingly sappy, confessing he wished I'd stick around the capital so we could kick it before cracking. Don't snub me when you're some big shot aristocrat. I shot him a look. After a year of watching every single officer and sorcerer in this realm treat even the lowest grunt as a peer, the notion of me getting snooty felt like an insult. Chris just grinned and shrugged. All right, my bad. Come take a swing. Typical Chris. He always tries to goad me into striking first, just so he can claim self-defense and thrash me during our drills. Right then, Master Hood strolled over, accompanied by a fresh face, the elite pyromancer, Ryan. Literally every pair of eyes in the hall locked onto us. 2 of the realm's legendary guardians, striding straight toward my out-of-the-way table. I quickly gulped down my mouth full, trying to project the poise of a noble in training, rather than some random kid who'd been shoveling venison down his throat just 30 seconds prior. Hood gave a smirk and asked which arcane academy I intended to join. It hit me with total embarrassment that I had no clue what choices were on the table. Hood chuckled and filled me in. The Imperial Royal Magic Academy grooms court mages for the castle. The Imperial Elemental Magic Academy dives into element-based spellcraft, covering the core 4 plus the advanced 4. Ice, lightning, light, and dark. The Imperial Sacred Magic Academy tackles all things non-elemental, and the Imperial Alchemy Magic Academy zeroes in on crafting magical gear and mystic circles. Before I could even reply, the Fire Archmage, Ryan, casually piped up, "If you're aiming for the Research Institute, Hood, and I can totally back your application." This guy literally rides a flaming phoenix, has reduced whole elven forests to absolute cinders, and honestly looks way more like a pro wrestler than a wizard. Crimson hair, a massive beard, and biceps that could crush walnuts. And here he was, offering to personally vouch for me. My mind completely blanked out for a moment, but I needed the basics, not high-level research. So I politely opted for the Imperial Elemental Magic Academy instead. Ryan gave an approving nod. Solid choice. Hood and I are both alumni from there. Oh, great. My future school's graduates happen to include 2 of the 3 most powerful powerhouses in the realm. No pressure at all for the entrance exam, right? Hood advised me to head back home first, and then check in at the academy, since basically every single eye in the palace was glued to me as I stood beside 2 supreme mages. I awkwardly excused myself from the scene and slipped away to the courtyard. Strolling through the royal gardens, my thoughts drifted toward my hunter dad and my big brother deployed up in the north. Even though I'm technically an isekai soul from another world, this body's blood still binds us to family. Nearly a year of combat had completely reshaped me. Dad would barely spot the scrawny kid who left. Then a bizarre thought crossed my mind. This brain has absolutely no memories of a mother. Zip. Not a face, not a name, not even a bedtime story. That's super weird, but it's not like I can probe into it without blowing my cover as a transmigrator. Filed away under future mysteries. The next morning, I went to book a carriage home. A 2-hour wait? Fine. I hopped into a shared coach with 5 young soldiers, all sporting various medals. The second they spotted my mage badge, the whole carriage went dead silent. One guy politely asked why I wasn't taking the Mage Association's Special Express shuttle with wind speed enchantments. Say what? There's a fast track just for mages and nobody told me? I mentally drew a massive red circle around Captain Chris's name in my grudge notebook. That smirking punk watched me head to the standard ticket office and kept his mouth shut, but I couldn't let these troops see a mage looking totally clueless. So, putting on my most dignified poker face, I said, "I prefer the company. Traveling alone is a bore. I'd rather make a few friends." Smooth save. Everyone instantly chilled out. A sharp-eyed young private named Clark chuckled, mentioning most mages he'd met were either hermits, fixated on training, or treasure-hunting adventurers, who didn't really mix with regular folks. I told him I was just a basic draftee, nothing special. Clark had a silver medal pinned to his chest. When I asked about it, he shared his tale. He had sneaked into a Ross military outpost to gather intel, secured the data, and then got shot dead while fleeing. Wait, dead? The captain retrieved his corpse, and Hood's mass resurrection spell revived him. He was quite literally slain in battle and undead by sorcery. This guy gave his life for the realm, and lived to talk about it. When I asked if anyone cast Stoneskin on him before deployment, he just scoffed. Earth mages are way too scarce to waste on a basic scout, he muttered. Then he mentioned that the entire land owed its life to some prodigy caster named Luo. How? Who wiped out 5 siege towers. Man, we're blessed to have him. Hold up. What did you say your name was again? 5 pairs of eyes slowly locked onto me, wide with shock. I let out a sigh and nodded. Yeah, I'm that Luo. How? Do I really look like a prodigy? The carriage went wild. All 5 soldiers started shouting over each other, bombarding me with questions like a rapid-fire assault. How'd you take down those towers? Is Stoneskin as badass as they say? Are you actually Hood's apprentice? Can you do that organ trick? I ended up spending the entire next 3 days dealing with a relentless fan Q&A instead of meditating. But to be fair, these were courageous troops who put everything on the line for the very same kingdom I defended. Humoring them was the least I could manage. By the time the coach pulled into my hometown, we had become real buddies. I waved goodbye to 5 of the finest fellows I'd ever crossed paths with, then strolled down the familiar roads toward my house. These were the exact paths I traversed a year prior as a baffled, poorly dressed transmigrator, incapable of performing basic magic. Now I was returning as a mid-lower junior mage and an honorary baron, a triple gold medalist, a rainbow medal recipient, and the official bearer of the Ground Sinker title. The chosen disciple of an archmage, the guy who wrecked 5 siege towers, creator of a totally game-changing assassination spell, and a future student at the exact academy that bred the realms. 2 ultimate living wizards. Honestly, pretty solid for a college dropout who used to binge anime all day. I swung open the door to our small cabin, figuring my dad would be asleep, but walked right into a surprise party instead. The entire place just erupted with cheers. Dad, my big bro Rod, Rona, Walker, Giles, like half the town. Everyone was packed into our cramped log home, which was decked out like a festival tent, complete with a table loaded up with food and fruit wine. The mayor boomed, "Welcome back, Hero Mage." And before it could even register, Dad and Rod locked me in a massive group hug, squeezing so hard I thought my ribs were going to snap. Dad muttered, "Welcome home, my boy," and I just completely broke down. All the battles, all that stress, every single brush with death just vanished, leaving only warmth. Honestly, this guy's chest felt like the safest spot in the entire multiverse. As it turned out, Chris had set up the whole gig behind my back. Royal couriers have been giving my folks updates ever since my very first victory on the battlefield. So, everyone was already totally in the loop about the medals, the rank, the destroyed towers, everything. Dad mentioned that the whole village looks at me as their personal savior. Rod, my older brother, was back on leave since the elves paused their assault for the winter. He smirked and went, "Cheers to you, I actually got a break." Walker told me that fighting by my side down south was the greatest highlight of his life, and that he's signing up for real pretty soon. Giles and Rona were just smiling widely at me from across the table. Just for one flawless night. The bloodiest front lines of the Crete kingdom seemed like a distant memory, but then Rod dropped a total bombshell. The king himself had dispatched a special envoy offering to move our whole family out to the capital suburbs. They'd handle everything. Housing, logistics, the whole deal. Rod could secure a transfer to the Imperial Royal Guard. And Dad was invited along too. The ruler of an entire nation was pretty much saying, "Please, let me upgrade your home." I was completely speechless. I desperately wanted us together, but I assumed Dad loved his quiet, small town lifestyle, and Rod wouldn't want people thinking he was just riding his little brother's coattails. So I lost my nerve and just said, "I'm on board with whatever you guys decide." The entire room just cracked up at me. Rod smirked and went, "You think you're the only hotshot around here?" I took down 2 major targets from the elves' most wanted list, Wendy Leister and Moonsong Deblitz. The brass decided I've got a real knack for assassination, so they're reassigning me to the Imperial Assassination HQ. And my trainer? None other than your buddy, Captain Chris. Plus, Dad had already agreed to move to the capital with both of us. We were set to leave in 2 days. Everything had been completely sorted before I even stepped inside. Then Giles chimed in with more news. Walker got cleared for official military service and was bound for the Imperial Infantry training camp. Rona had signed up as a permanent army medic and was heading straight to the Imperial Royal Hospital for residency. As for Giles, who refused to be the only loser left behind, he had his dad, the mayor, pull some serious strings to snag him a desk job in the capital. The whole crew was heading to the capital, all of us in this together. I just stood there, catching flies with my mouth wide open. Rona chuckled and said, "Hey, don't celebrate just yet. We're all crashing at your place. That fancy noble estate of yours should be plenty big, right?" "Yeah, absolutely. No problem at all." I was so incredibly stoked I could barely get the words out. The rest of dinner was nothing short of pure bliss. Good food, warm laughter, just good vibes all around. The next day was pure chaos. The whole town pitched in to help us pack. Rona and Giles brought along 6 entire carriages worth of gear. Seriously, enough personal belongings to completely furnish a small castle. We had clothes, cookware, snacks, and even actual furniture. Meanwhile, Walker just had a single backpack, because of course he did. That evening, inside our completely empty cabin, Dad sat us down and dropped a bombshell that left both Rod and me totally frozen. "It's about time I told you guys about your mother." We had never heard him bring her up before, not even once. Even the original memories of House Luo contained absolutely zero information about Mother. Rod looked completely shell-shocked too. We just stared at Dad like a pair of statues, barely daring to breathe. Dad spoke deliberately. "Your mother originally came from a noble lineage in the Roth Kingdom. Yes, the very same nation that just tried to wipe us out, back when our countries were still on friendly terms. She traveled here to study at the Imperial Royal Magic Academy. While out on a routine patrol, Dad, working as a soldier, literally bumped into her on the street. It was instant love at first sight for both. She was fully aware that a noble lady and a common grunt of a soldier had no real future together. But she honestly didn't care. She lied to her school, secretly dropped out, and within 2 years, she gave birth to the two of you. Then, her father paid her a completely unexpected visit. The whole secret unraveled, yet she steadfastly refused to reveal where Dad and her 2 infants were keeping out of sight, no matter what. Her absolutely furious father dragged her right back to Roth. Dad then used her personal savings along with his military pension to secure a modest little place just outside the capital, paid a guy to watch us finish up his tour of duty, and then tucked us away in this tiny, isolated town where no one could ever track us down. Our mom is actually alive in Rost, the enemy kingdom, the exact same nation whose military I spent months battling, the very place whose siege towers I personally buried deep into the ground. She belongs to the nobility of the land that attempted to completely wipe mine off the map. I sat inside that vacant cabin, staring down at the floor, my thoughts spinning through 100 different angles all at once. Rod was just as quiet beside me. This situation basically spiraled from sweet homecoming to my family tree is a literal international crisis. In roughly 60 seconds flats, Rod and I just froze there, looking over at Dad, utterly at a loss for words. Rod wanted to offer some comforting words, but he couldn't find them, and as for me, even though I'm technically an incarnate soul from an alternate world, witnessing this man who spent 2 decades hurting in absolute isolation, deeply yearning for the woman he loves. Well, that hit me straight in the heart. I murmured softly, "Someday, I'm going to bring Mom back home to you." Dad instantly shook his hands, shutting that idea right down. "I only wanted you to know the reality of it. It's been 2 decades. Don't go messing up her life now. What's your plan anyway? Force her into committing treason." Honestly, he made a valid point. We just sat in the quiet for a bit before turning in for the night. Turns out, some messes can't be fixed with quicksand. The following morning, our small fleet of 6 traveling carriages headed out of town with all the local residents, waving us goodbye. Dad, Rod, Walker, Giles, Rona, and myself were all packed tightly into a single coach. With Giles around, the atmosphere remained pretty upbeat, mostly because that dude physically cannot stop acting like a total clown. We passed straight through Orco City, where I attempted to drop by and see Morgan at the Mage Guild. Except he was out of town visiting relatives. Looks like the cosmos just doesn't want me giving this guy my props face to face. The moment we pulled up to our new place, pretty much everyone's jaws hit the floor at the exact same time. It was a literal mansion with a courtyard, main hall, and a back garden. 5 whole stories including a cellar and attic, plus 18 bedrooms. This butler named Fox, dressed in a sleek black suit, bowed and greeted us. "Welcome. I'm the head butler of the quasi-barren Luo estate." Like we actually had a butler, not to mention a personal driver, 2 gatekeepers, and a pair of maids. 6 random kids from the middle of nowhere just stood there in the grand foyer, looking like totally stray puppies dropped into a palace. Fox showed us the ropes and helped lug our bags up the stairs, and then he served up an absolute feast for lunch. Honestly, we devoured it like a pack of wild animals. Fox just stood off to the side, monitoring our table etiquette, or rather, our complete lack of it. And as I literally started twitching, I could totally tell he was thinking, this is by far the most uncultured aristocrat I've ever had to accommodate. Spot on, Fox. And trust me, it's only downhill from here. Right after eating, Dad crashed for a nap, while the 5 of us piled into the private coach to head off to our different spots. Walker was bound for the Imperial Infantry training camp. Rona went to the Imperial Royal Hospital, and Giles left for his boring administrative desk job. Rod had already clocked in at the Hitman headquarters run by Chris. As for my destination, the Imperial Elemental Magic Academy. The main entrance was crafted from 8 distinct pigments, each signifying a different element. It looked absolutely stunning. I presented my official royal papers, and a sentry sprinted inside to announce me. Barely a minute later, this gorgeous girl came rushing out to greet me. She introduced herself as Sophia, the school's administrative assistant, and gave me a genuine smile, saying, "Earthsinker, Luo, how? I've heard so many amazing things about you. Awesome. My reputation precedes me. I'm never shaking it." Sophia gave me a tour of the campus, which was gorgeous. I might have snuck a couple of peeks at her while acting like I was checking out the buildings. She led me into an office, where some middle-aged guy stared at me for maybe a single second before saying, "Provisional Class 3. That was it. No, welcome aboard." No handshake, just Class 3. Later, Sophia filled me in on the rules as we walked. All freshmen start in provisional tracks for core classes, then face a major selection exam. Tons of people fail, pass, and you're officially in. Flunk, and you're back to provisional with one last shot. Screw up that retake and, well, she left it unsaid, but I bet it involves a lot of tears. Then, she happily announced, "First up today is aristocratic etiquette. It's starting right now. A freaking course it is." I survived a literal war, only for the very first thing waiting for me to be the exact subject I desperately wanted to dodge. That fire wizard at the feast did warn me about this. High society manners, the one foe I can't just trap in quicksand. Sophia stopped short right by a classroom door, and I nearly slammed face first in her back. She didn't even notice, just flashed a smile, told me to head inside and wait, then gracefully drifted away. I watched her walk off for a beat longer than I should have, before turning around to peek inside the room. And right there, hanging out in the front row, was a face I hadn't seen for nearly a year. Luo Hao CDs. The wealthy girl from basic training. The one who couldn't even manage 2 laps. The one who gifted me those earth magic potions, along with a little handwritten note. The person who kept crossing my mind during those endless carriage rides. She leaped up and practically sprinted over to me. Her expression beamed like the morning sun. She had changed. That fragile, spoiled merchant's daughter was completely gone. A year of combat had forged a sharper person, poised and more self-assured, yet that grin remained identical. She mentioned that her family's other young successors turn out to be good-for-nothing party animals, so the folks bet it all on her, pouring a fortune into enrolling her in this academy. She had reached the rank of a lower junior water mage. Laughing, I remarked that we'd trained and fought a war together. And now we're schoolmates again. This has got to be destiny. Also, I just realized I never even knew your specific affinity. Looking down, she murmured softly, "Water element, lower junior tier." Right then we just stood there in that mostly deserted classroom. 2 battle veterans masquerading as ordinary students. And I thought to myself, this might honestly be the absolute finest moment of my whole Ice Guy journey so far. Forget the medals. Forget the titles. Forget ground sinker. See, she was blushing, and I was grinning like a total idiot. And for the first time since dropping into this world, everything felt completely right. Then aristocratic protocol class commenced, and everything felt entirely wrong again. I told Seeds she was making rapid progress and would likely escape her family's arranged marriage. Plots after graduation. Looking pensive, she noted that the school's graduation rate is under a third, so she wasn't too confident. Before I could offer a quick pep talk, students began pouring in, forcing us to quiet down. A chime mimicking magical birdsong echoed out, and in strolled the most dapper gentleman I've ever laid eyes on. Count Austin, slender and blonde, he glided, as though each stride was directed by a royal ballet. Master, he offered a bow to us, an actual count bowing to a room packed with commoner war veterans. Then he spoke in a perfectly measured cadence about how we'd serve the realm with honor, and how the gates of high society were swinging open for us. I braced myself for the usual stuck-up aristocrat routine, and ended up with the total opposite. The guy had real, genuine class. Not that I'm superior to you vibe, but more like the I'll lift everyone up type. Honestly, I was pretty blown away, which is rare. Then he mentioned, hardly any of you hold noble titles yet. Save for one. My stomach instantly dropped. Quasi-Baron of the Ground Sinker, Luo Hao. Would you please stand and introduce yourself? Just kill me now. 100 pairs of eyes locked onto me like perfectly synced spotlights. Avoiding all eye contact, I stood up and internally cursed Hood for cooking up that ridiculous title. By tomorrow morning, every single student in every makeshift classroom would know me as the Ground Sinker. Austin beamed and told the rest of the class to follow my example. An example? I'm just a clueless world hopper who got lucky with a cheap bargain book. Yet everyone treats me like the pinnacle of human achievement. I sat back down amidst a wave of jealous glares, while Austin kicked off the actual lesson by asking, "What exactly defines a noble?" This brave blonde fellow stood up and took a shot. Nobles are elite, upper class individuals who draw government salaries. Austin graciously told him to take a seat, essentially saying, "Let me completely reshape your perception of nobility." So, here's what I gathered. In the kingdom of Crete, nobility is never inherited. There are absolutely 0 hereditary titles. You earn your status by making massive contributions to the realm. and by being a genuinely upstanding person who serves as an inspiration to everyday citizens. There are a mere 357 nobles nationwide, and each one of them fully deserves the honor. Securing a title demands an 80% approval rating from the National Congress, and climbing ranks takes at least 3 years per promotion. The 5 ranks, Duke, Marquis, Count, Viscount, Baron, each is divided into provisional and official status, making 10 levels total. All of a sudden, it clicked why the king awarded me a rainbow medal, rather than a higher peerage title at the ceremony. The system straight up won't permit fast-tracking. You could literally save the whole kingdom, and still be forced to wait 3 years before advancing from quasi-baron to full baron. Honestly, this is the most bureaucratically sound aristocracy I've ever run across. My modern-day political science brain was actually pretty damn impressed. Austin explained that mages get way more shots at earning titles because a single elite mage can totally disrupt the balance of power between nations. Both Hood and Ryan are dukes, 2 of a mere 5 in the whole kingdom, and both graduated from this very academy. He told us to set our sights on that level. The entire classroom was practically buzzing with patriotic hype. Everyone's eyes were blazing with noble ambitions. Well, everyone except me. Don't get me wrong. Austin's speech was masterfully put together. His charisma was totally off the charts, and his points were genuinely persuasive. But I come from a world with democracy, constitutional law, and a healthy distrust of feudal power structures. So while everyone else was mentally drafting their acceptance speeches for a future ducal ceremony, I was just sitting there thinking, man, this guy could sell ice to penguins. I did low-key respect the setup, though. Knowing inheritance, merit-based advancement, parliamentary oversight, and 3-year cooldowns. Crete's nobility was drawn up by someone who actually tried to put a stop to corruption, especially compared to most fantasy realms. This region was incredibly well managed, Austin concluded, as he wrapped up by recounting the peak triumphs of Crete's top aristocrats. Tales of bravery kept coming, keeping the whole room totally hooked. Right then, the Fire Phoenix bell chimed once more, and he smoothly drifted out of the room with the exact same flawless, choreographed poise he had when he walked in. Impeccable performance. 10 out of 10 would definitely attend again. Unwinding a bit, I stood up and got ready to roll. Honestly, I'd been low-key, meditating through the whole presentation, since multitasking is basically my superpower. But right then, I realized the crowd was slowly swarming around me. Dozens of students with bright, starstruck eyes, dying to interrogate me about every single detail of my time in the war. I took a deep breath. Yep, here we go again. The standard Luo How Q&A session. Except now, it's in a classroom. Well, at least nobody was drafting my obituary this time around. After enduring a solid 20 minutes of being grilled by a bunch of fanatical peers, Cedric grabbed my wrist and hauled me off to our next period before my brain fried. I asked how many more lectures we had lined up today. She happily rattled them off. First, basics of magic, followed by a double session of sacred scripture overview. I nearly stumbled over my own feet. Sacred scripture? 2 whole blocks of that. I literally fled an active combat zone, just to end up in a place that might actually be worse. I mean, out on the battlefield, nobody was forcing me to study theology. Basics of Magic was run by an instructor named Lucia. She had crimson hair, styled up, and a welcoming yet strict tone. The exact type of educator who makes you feel perfectly safe right before drowning you in assignments. She kicked things off with a core concept that instantly caught my attention. Magic is the art of utilizing focused willpower to direct elemental forces. Utilizing your personal mana with precise chance. Short and sweet. Sweet, someone finally broke down. Spellcasting without making it all cryptic. She mentioned the hardcore theory could hold off until we hit advanced tiers. The whole classroom collectively let out a breath. Most of us here are combat veterans, not pampered prodigies raised in elite academies. Next, she dropped some vital intel I actually needed. The formal sorcerer grading system isn't dictated by one lone realm. It was created by the magic sanctuary on the mystical continent, and it's recognized by every human land. Before earning your official title, you're considered an elemental affinity user, or just a simple apprentice. The real kicker isn't about raw power, though. It boils down to whether a mid-tier or higher caster has taken you under their wing. This isn't just arbitrary gatekeeping, either. Think of it as quality control. They want to ensure casters have some actual morals, so complete lunatics don't go around turning regular folks to stone for kicks. Fair point. I've dealt with plenty of psychos in the war zone. Vetting them makes total sense. The certified ranks run from junior mage, mid-tier mage, senior mage, up to super mage. Each of those first 3 grades is split into lower, middle, and upper ranks, making 10 levels in all. Lucia made sure to point out that using slang like low rank instead of lower tier is technically improper grammar and would definitely cost you points on tests. I glanced back at Cetis, who just playfully blew a raspberry at me since she'd been using that exact slang terminology this whole time. Towering above those 10 standard levels stands the legendary forbidden spell Grandmaster, essentially a straight-up deity. They are so far past a super mage that comparisons are pointless. Lucia remarked that the bulk of super mages will head off to the magic continent to track down the ultimate mysteries of sorcery, which is precisely why Hood and Ryan's staying behind too. Defend Crete is such a massive deal. They ditched personal godhood to serve their country. Then came a part that got everyone totally hyped. Lucia brought up that the Grand Master of the Magic Sanctuary is a guy named Andrew. His title? The World Ender. He's the only living forbidden spellcaster we know of. His fire-based forbidden spell is called Judgment Day, and he sits at the absolute peak of magical power. Plus, he came up through the elemental magic system, just like us. Instantly, every basic 4-element student there completely forgot they were ever told their element was weak. Their eyes were practically burning with ambition. They were already visualizing themselves in Andrew's seat, waving a staff around and claiming, "I'm the World Ender." Lucia had them completely eating out her hand. Then she smirked and noted that even the weakest element, Earth Magic, once produced a historical figure known as the Earth King. And right now, you have an outstanding Earth Mage representative sitting right among you. Once again, every single eye zeroed in on me. Then Lucia chimed in, his title, Ground Sinker, sounds pretty similar to World Ender. I hope he and all of you will become pillars of the kingdom of Crete. Ground Sinker and World Ender. She seriously compared them out loud. One literally obliterates worlds, while the other just makes the dirt drop down a bit. The whole class was dying trying not to burst out laughing, and I was dying trying not to crawl under my desk. Hood gave me that nickname as a total joke, and now it has officially been uttered in the exact same breath as the most powerful sorcerer in human history. I am straight up never forgiving that old man. Ever. Lucia giggled to break the tension a bit, before diving into the setup of the Magic Association. But truth be told, I totally zoned out since half my brain was busy meditating, while the rest was drafting a pretty angry complaint letter to Master Hood regarding proper choice of titles. Dear Hood, Ground Sinker isn't anywhere near World Ender. Fix this, please. Sufferingly yours, the dude who digs holes. A whole month of lectures, passed in a blur of high society etiquette, holy texts. 2 whole sessions of that every single time, magic theory, and me just low-key meditating through the whole deal. Then, the terrifying department placement test arrived. I met up with Cetis on test morning, and she looked like she was walking the green mile. I tried to chill her out. It's the debut test for this. It can't be that brutal. Besides, you're already a junior mage tier. But word had reached her through the grapevine that the school principal, Jarvis, was supervising this ordeal himself, and word is, he's got a strict streak that makes Andre from basic training look like a total pushover. 500 desks were set up all over Element Square. First up was the written test, 8 modules, 6 solid hours of nonstop writing. My wrist was about to snap off, but honestly, after surviving the gauntlet of Chinese college boards in my previous lifetime, a basic magic theory exam was a cakewalk. The prompts were just the same points they'd beaten into our heads all month. Finally, the buzzer sounded. The sheets were collected, and I was ready to just pass out with relief, right when Principal Jarvis stood up and made the call. Everyone please head over to the training grounds for the all-inclusive combat trial. 500 students let out the exact same groan, a sound landing somewhere between a gasp and a dying beast. 6 brutal hours of written exams, followed straight away by physical combat. No downtime, not even a snack. The guy was a total sadist masquerading as an educator. The physical assessment consisted of 3 segments: endurance, agility, and close-quarters combat, courtesy of Captain Chris beating the absolute crap out of me for nearly a year on the Eastern Front. I completely aced all 3 parts. The proctors gave me approving nods while the rest of the students were gasping for air and stumbling around like clumsy newborn deer. Then, because Jarvis clearly thrives on misery, the magic examination kicked off right afterward. Nobody even had the strength left to complain. We just shuffled like zombies to the magic training grounds. 8 color-coded sectors, 1 for each element, gauging magical capacity, spell performance, and actual live combat evaluation. Enchanted items were banned, but this is where being a celebrity finally paid off, since I had developed the Petrify Organ spell and scored the Ground Sinker moniker. I was granted a complete waiver for the magical portion, an automatic top grade. I chilled in the lounge area, watching my peers get completely wrecked by the proctors, experiencing a sweet blend of pity and relief. Some of these poor kids were getting tossed around like ragdolls. The live combat trial felt straight up criminal. I tracked down Sada's later, and she looked completely broken. Whatever went down in there had devastated her. I offered the best words of encouragement I could muster. Though there wasn't much to say, we split up, and I just meditated inside my coach during the whole ride home. The following morning, the grades were displayed on the bulletin board. A massive crowd of students gathered around it, and the vibe felt just like a funeral. Just around 80 names were written in gold, signaling they'd passed. Over 400 students were stuck taking the one final makeup test. The passing rate didn't even hit 20%, and Jarvis had apparently already cut them some slack, since we were war vets. So this is what easy looks like at the Imperial Elemental Magic Academy. Pretty terrifying. I spotted my name instantly, mostly because it was sitting at the dead top. Rank 1, perfect score, a clean 2,000 out of 2,000. It stood out so much it was actually kind of awkward, like rocking up to a casual pickup game, decked out in a full NBA uniform. Next, I scanned down the list looking for Siege's 112th. Honestly, she did great, genuinely great, but the cutoff stopped right around 80. She missed it. My stomach dropped. She fought on the front lines, trained for an entire year, and blew her family savings just to make it here. Yet she fell short by 32 spots. Just one makeup exam left. One last shot. A note at the bottom of the board ordered the entire provisional class to assemble at the Element Hall for a briefing with Chancellor Jarvis. I pushed through the crowd and headed over, halfway expecting another pop quiz, because frankly, nothing would surprise me anymore. The hall was already packing out by the time I arrived. No sign of Sieges anywhere. I took a seat and waited. Soon after, Jarvis stepped up to the podium and opened with the most brutal sentence he could have said. Let me be clear that these marks reflect criteria, which were already dialed back, out of respect for your service in the war. Already dialed back? This was the toned-down version? 500 combat veterans, and 80% of them still bombed the lenient exam. I'm starting to think the battlefield was a vacation. President Jarvis kicked things off with a mental sucker punch. These scores are already based on relaxed benchmarks. Then, he hit us with a brutal follow-up. The makeup test won't be any easier. If 0 people pass, it won't shock me. 400 students all at once hit the initial stage of grief. Yet, Jarvis wasn't completely heartless. He cushioned the blow by pointing out that bombing this wasn't the end of the line. Independent magic academies in the capital would gladly take in just about anyone who can sling spells. Plus, you can retry this academy's entry test every 6 months without an age limit. Furthermore, what actually counts in a wizard's career isn't the school you graduate from. It's gaining entry to the Magic Association, which brought back a real downer of a fact I picked up in Lucia's lecture. The Magic Association's baseline entry benchmark for most spellcasters is mid-level, specifically mid-tier for elemental mages, but it's upper mid-level, since there are tons of us fighting for spots. And for earth mages, lower senior tier, the requirements are scaled so ridiculously high for my specific element that it's pretty much the institution telling us, don't even bother trying. No wonder everyone's given me those pitying looks since day one. The whole institutional setup is hardwired to make earth mages feel like they picked the wrong path. Once the 400-plus flunkies shuffled out looking like they just walked out of their own wakes, Jarvis faced the 80 survivors of us and barked, "Congrats, but that was actually the easy part. Final exams around here are way tougher than what you just faced. The worst performing 10% get cut every single year, and your rivals, youths who've been training in sorcery since they could crawl." The celebration wrapped up in like 3 seconds, totally overtaken by pure dread. Even I got the chills. This academy literally doesn't let you chill for a second. My dream of being a slacker student here just suffered a brutal death, and right then Jarvis signaled, and about 20-odd folks rose from the front row. Our upcoming advisors, wearing different colored vestments for various elements, each one looking seriously intimidating. They were about to introduce themselves one by one, so we could pick our advisor. Pretty thrilling prospects. Total freedom, unless you're in the earth element. Jarvis dropped the news straight up without any sugarcoating. As for our 3 Earth Element students, my bad, but you guys don't get a choice. Just tag along behind Minterberg and head out. He's the sole Earth Department advisor with open spots left. He's a mid-2, high senior spellcaster holding a unique architect rank. You'll be fine, so no browsing around. No window shopping, no comparing choices. The 3 of us stood up, passed right by 80 peers who were hyped to check out the buffet of available advisors, and followed the solitary figure in the room, rocking a tan-colored robe straight out the door. That's the Earth Element life in a nutshell. Everyone else gets an actual menu, while you just get the leftovers. Minterberg was ancient. White hair, white beard, and a super weathered cloak. Yet the guy booked it so quickly that 3 youthful combat veterans could scarcely keep pace. He speed-walked us straight into an office completely, swallowed by paperwork and schematics. Piles on the desk, piles on the floor, piles stacked high on top of other piles. Structural blueprints literally everywhere. Then he delivered exactly 4 sentences. Tomorrow, I'm heading out to the northern frontier to oversee the stronghold's construction. The 3 of you will hit the books here. This is basic architectural theory. Text and construction prints, so master them quickly. Hit up the upperclassmen if you hit a wall. Earth mages are in massive demand right now. With that, he rolled up a scroll of diagrams and took off. The 3 of us just stood there amidst a whirlwind of scattered schematics, utterly stunned. I got fully ice-guyed into a fantasy realm of blades and magic, became a decorated war hero, scored medals and a title of nobility, even gained entry into the most elite magic institute in the entire kingdom. And my very first task is freaking civil engineering. I literally majored in civil engineering in my past life. I passed away, or whatever the hell happened to me. Got reincarnated into a land of sorcery and dragons, and forbidden hexes, only for the cosmos to go, cool story, bro. Now go crunch the weight-bearing stress for a border fortification. The lanky brunette kid beside me broke the awkward silence, asking, so, should we maybe do introductions? I just stared at the layouts. I stared at the manuals with titles like Fundamentals of Enchanted Architecture and Concepts in Structural Reinforcement. I stared at how my whole grand fantasy journey had brought me in a flawless loop right back to square one. Somewhere up in the heavens, the deity who transmigrated me is absolutely losing their mind laughing. My 2 new Earth Element comrades and I checked each other out in our blueprint-packed dungeon. Andy, 19, brown-haired from a northern town. Charles, 17, a blonde from a western village. Then it was my turn. I'm Luo Hao, the groundbreaker, and the guy with the perfect exam score. They wouldn't even let me finish introducing myself. Face-palming hard, I just accepted my grim reality. Celebrity life is a prison, and my cell blocks are packed. Once the mandatory fan interrogation wrapped up, I finally brought up the urgent question on my mind. Why does it feel like we just got drafted into blueprints? And drafting? Where is the high-level terramancy practice? An unfamiliar voice chimed in from behind a massive pile of schematics in the corner. Basic to intermediate earth magic is pretty much pointless in the real world. The absolute most critical spell for this realm is Tier 1 stone hardening. So, everyone underranked in our department is basically just a labor. As for actual spell training, stick to your meditation. The 3 of us nearly jumped right out of our boots. A guy's head peeked out from the fortress of paperwork. Richard, sophomore, mid-lower ranking apprentice. Just then, a different voice echoed from behind us, an upperclassman chiming in to clarify that Earth mages double as structural designers, simply due to a massive shortage of actual architects. She was so utterly swamped with work, she didn't even bother to look up. We shut our mouths immediately. Seriously, who knew how many upper-level students were staked out in here, lying low like paper camouflage ninjas? We quietly tracked down some open desks and cracked the manuals. I flipped open the Introduction to Architecture course, and within 5 minutes, I felt like losing my mind. See, here's a little secret that nobody in this reality knows. Back in my previous life, my family line had been master builders for generations, going strictly by our family records. Our earliest ancestor framed thatch huts, then upgraded to clay tiles, then grand temples, before becoming renowned estate designers, then imperial palace contractors, and eventually mega infrastructure engineers. My father was an absolute titan in structural design, meaning I literally grew up on blueprints and safety regulations. Getting into an elite civil engineering program was pretty much hardwired into my DNA. So opening this up and seeing what qualified as architecture in the Kingdom of Crete nearly gave me a total meltdown. Their whole building strategy boils down to piling rocks on top of each other, spamming structural reinforcement spells. Until it all fuses together, boom, finished. No foundations, no rebar, no load-bearing math, zero structural engineering whatsoever. They literally just stack crap up and glue it with magic. I checked out the blueprints right after that. Indoor layouts, completely lacking emergency exits. Lighting schemes that were just, put a window here, maybe. The orientation of buildings, decided by what looked like a coin toss. Every blueprint seemed like it was drawn up by someone who knew what a building was, but had never actually set foot in one. I dropped it all, tossed the schematics aside, and started meditating. Boosting my mana pool is way more crucial than analyzing. Stone Age architecture. Talk about bad timing, though. Burr came back right then. He stepped inside, caught me meditating instead of reading, and shot me a look that could curdle milk. I cursed myself internally. Caught slacking on day one by the exact dude who just ordered us to hit the books. Before I could even offer an excuse, he said coldly, "Head home and pack. You're coming with me to the northern border tomorrow." And walked out. Andy and Charles took one look at my stressed-out face and completely lost it. Richard peeked out from behind his newspaper. For to add, pro tip, completely bottoming out your mana during construction also expands your maximum capacity. It just hurts a hell of a lot more than normal meditation. Best of luck, though. At least you get to ride a bald eagle alongside Minda Book. Flying is a total blast, and cruising on a massive eagle? Epic. Getting penalized with hard labor at some building. Sight out on a freezing frontier? Not so epic. Net result? Honestly up in the air. The following morning, Bird tossed a pile of schematics my way, and we headed off to the northern frontier on hired. Bald eagles from the capital city's aviation hub. Perch on an eagle, gliding through the mist with the breeze hitting my face. Was actually mind-blowing. 10 out of 10. Highly recommend. For roughly 3 minutes, I completely forgot I was being shipped off to a magical labor camp as a penalty. Then Bird chimed in, "So you're the one who collapses terrain?" I gave a dazed nod. He then went off on a whole tangent about how terramancers are way more valuable in everyday society than on a battlefield. Basic earth magic is pretty useless in a fight. Intermediate level is also trash. Even advanced tier is mostly pointless. If the legendary Earth King hadn't come along to show that this element actually has some juice, earth magic would literally be a forgotten relic. Bird's whole outlook was basic. Screw the glory, screw the fighting, just construct stuff. That is how geomancers truly provide value to the world. Alright, let me get this straight. I got Ice Guide from a life where I majored in structural engineering, right into a mythical realm where I became a decorated combat champion with a legendary exploit guide, only to discover that my true calling is still just structural engineering. Except this time around, I'm doing it with spells on a giant bird in a blizzard. Fate isn't merely having a good laugh at my expense. It's practically writing a stand-up routine. I was genuinely starting to suspect that my lineage bears some sort of ancient blueprint hex. Talk about a past life. Architectural legacy, ranging from basic thatched hut assembly, straight up to grand palace engineering in this life. An affinity for the earth element. An earth magic tome, and now I'm put on. Yep, you guessed it, labor. The universe has a type, and that type is forcing me to build stuff. Berg saw I'd gone quiet and figured he'd crush my soul, so he tried to sugarcoat things a bit. Earth mages might not look flashy, but they actually do the most for everyday life. Erecting structures, modifying terrain. These form the bedrock of a powerful realm. And hey, if that doesn't sound hype enough, once you hit the lower mid-tier, you can learn rock shaping and just be a chill sculptor. A sculptor? Seriously, that's his hype speech? No guedes, Keith. Someday you can chisel statues for cash. Shoot for the stars, why don't you, Bird? I took a deep breath and asked for the fort's plans. He passed them over, and I began scanning the mid-air on the eagle. Not even 30 seconds in, I want to chuck them. The fortress blueprints were so basic, it physically hurt. Zero proper foundations, no load-bearing system, and absolutely zero defensive strategy to speak of. The whole design strategy was basically pile up rocks, cast a hardening spell, and pray it holds. My grandfather from my past life would be crying. Heck, my earliest ancestor who put up grass shacks could have engineered a better fort. Bird kept talking through the whole flight, and honestly, his background story was tragic. Earthcasters are so rare, they're outnumbered, even by advanced elemental variants like frost and lightning. They spend their entire lives hustling across the country working construction gigs, instead of actually leveling up their magic. Most of them just burn out and shift to sculpting, or endlessly grind to the lower senior ranks, solely to sign up with the Magic Guild and score a cozy, easy life. Pretty much no one sticks around to help develop. The Academy. The school takes in more Earth students than anywhere else. Yet less than 1 in 10 actually stays in construction for the long haul. Some wealthy kids even ditch their wizarding careers altogether, simply to dodge the draft. Bird told me this trip wasn't some punishment for skipping classes. He brought me along because my magical skills already matched those of sophomore, and they desperately needed every Earth mage available. The frontline conflict just wrapped up, and they had to wrap up repairs and build up the northern border forts before springtime, right when the elves reboot their annual invasion plans. I could hear the exhaustion in his voice. Decades of tackling a brutal workload, short-staffed and without enough backing. I silently began brainstorming ways to pitch in without giving away too much of my past life's engineering expertise. We touched down at a northern outpost called Bayuga in under 2 hours. Flying by Eagle is insanely quick compared to riding in wagons, though we had to swap to a carriage for the final leg. Berg clarified that Eagle routes drain a mid-tier psychic mage's entire mana pool per flight, making these flight hubs rare and pricey. Fair point. You can't go burning out your psychics just for a fast commute. We arrived at a tiny stronghold, with arrows still sticking out of the brickwork. Grim reminders of recent skirmishes. North of the outpost lay a massive wasteland of blackened ground, the result of Ryan torching the elven woods. Past that, snow-dusted forests reached all the way to the horizon, the heart of elven territory, and then a blazing phoenix swooped down from above. Ryan himself showed up right here, giving me a quick nod, before addressing Berg with some serious respect. Master Berg, I'm real sorry to bother you yet again. Berg just brushed it off with a laugh. Those two clearly went way back. Then, Ryan dropped the grim news. The elves had completely broken their own rule. They'd never launched a winter attack before, until now. A detachment of elven rangers had executed a midnight raid on an eastern stronghold, casting a Tier 1 elemental dispel straight at every single load-bearing point. The entire outpost, which relied solely on rock reinforcement magic to stay upright, crumbled in an instant. Pretty much everyone inside wiped out. Berg and I instantly went pale. If those elves figured out that a single basic counterspell could easily wreck our whole defensive grid, then every stronghold along the northern border is just a death trap. Come springtime, they could topple them all like a house of cards. Berg fell silent, pondering deeply for a while, and then uttered a crushing truth. This is a massive, incredibly tough riddle. Without that rock reinforcement, building these fortifications is flat out impossible. The sole structure I've ever encountered that bypasses it is the Imperial Royal Museum, and that thing was literally chiseled out of solid mountain. Ryan replied solemnly, should the elves deploy this exact strategy once spring hits, every single northern outpost is going to cave instantly. Berg's expression made it look like he was carrying the burden of the whole realm right on his back. This mess was way over his head, way over the head of any living geomancer, honestly. Well, except for maybe one specific earth mage, someone who spent a past life raised by a lineage of contractors, going back for dozens of generations. An earth mage who actually mastered modern structural engineering. An earth mage who took one quick glance at these fortress schematics and thought, man, a kid playing with blocks could design better. I spoke up and mentioned I might have a fix. Two of the most influential veteran figures in the kingdom of Crete whipped around to stare at a teenager. This building curse isn't a curse at all. It's been prepping me for this exact moment across 2 whole lifetimes. Every single blueprint Dad left on the kitchen table. Every construction theory class I dozed through in college. Each time I whined about studying low-bearing math, it was all leading up to this. Right here, to a freezing border outpost that's about to get a total makeover by a reincarnated civil engineering student posing as some kind of magical builder. Let's construct something that won't collapse the second an elf sneezes near it. Berg and Ryan both stopped dead when I offered a solution. Berg instantly demanded to know what it was. I asked, can I crash somewhere to sketch some blueprints? An hour later, Berg was clutching my new fortress layout like it was some sacred text, his jaw dropping down so low a bird could have built a nest in it. Even Ryan, a guy whose main talent is basically burning everything down, could sense the aggressive defensive vibes radiating straight off the pages. And honestly, I wasn't even sweating it that hard. I just sketched a standard modern fort using concepts my family had been polishing for generations. Interlocking structural integrity, defensive sight lines, subterranean bunkers, kill zones, arrow slits, and multiple fallback points. Everything a legitimate stronghold ought to feature, which this world's architects seemingly never considered because they've been too busy going, just patch it up with magic, lol. Berg gaped at me with a look I can only describe as scientifically awestruck. Then he asked, "How'd you come up with this?" I had my alibi ready. I took cues from my hunter. Father's game traps in the wartime siege towers. Berg totally swallowed it, which is great because the reality that I'm a reincarnated civil engineering major from an architectural dynasty might have been a bit tough to explain. Berg started totally geeking out. Flawless space management, effortless to defend. Practically una sailable underground sectos. Even if surrounded, it holds. And the kicker? Zero rock reinforcement required anywhere. The blueprint lets the structure support itself completely. He actually remarked that the master architect title belonged to me rather than him. In my head, duh, obviously. Out loud, "Oh no, sir. You're way too kind." This was honestly just a random stroke of genius. Please spot the defects so we can fix them. Except there weren't any. He checked and found nothing. He even noted that the supply expenses were lower than the initial draft, and the build difficulty was way simpler. The guy was practically buzzing with hype. Ryan cut right to the chase. How long to build one? Burr guessed about 10 days with a full crew, repurposing salvaged materials from the old strongholds. Ryan didn't blink. Raise them all. Reconstruct everything. The whole northern garrison is on duty. For the teardown, just copy the Elves' own playbook. Cast Elemental Dispel on the critical supports. Burr got so hyped he was damn near bouncing off the walls. The assembly isn't even intricate. Standard military commanders can oversee it. We'll even have surplus supplies to erect additional outposts. I just stood there, watching two total icons completely lose their cool, reflecting on my first-year structural engineering basics, and questioning if I had gone a bit overkill. But then Berg suddenly turned pale. "Hold up, we've got a massive problem." Total silence hit the room. Berg laid it out. The elves had just uncovered an elemental incantation, a simple-natured magic trick that can instantly bring down any structure secured by rock reinforcement. And that means literally every single building in the realm. Every home, every watchtower, every government hub. But most of all, bridges and reservoirs. If the remaining 3 rival nations caught wind of this method and smuggled infiltrators, gifted in nature magic straight into Crete, they could wreck vital infrastructure in a single night. Just one operative could sabotage a dam and completely submerge a whole valley. The kingdom of Crete had unintentionally grounded its entire society on a setup that a Tier 1 spell could completely wipe out. Every structure nationwide was basically a house of cards, and those elves had just figured out how to blow it down. Burr mentioned he was rushing straight back to the capital to alert the sovereign and mobilize Earth sorcerers from all 4 academies into an urgent research committee. He instructed me to remain behind, manage the fort's rebuilding as a test model, and then head back to the capital as fast as I could. With that, he took off on an eagle. In a total panic, Ryan informed me he'd round up the frontier troops for the engineering project, and that I needed to teach the commanders to manage the building operations on their own. He then threw in, "Oh, and while you're at it, you might want to brainstorm a fix for our massive national infrastructure crisis, too. You clearly have the chops for it." Next thing I knew, he casually flew off on a blazing phoenix, leaving me completely isolated at this frozen outpost, inside a fort with a crowd of military officers, gazing at me like totally clueless pups. And I've got to teach medieval troops contemporary building methods by using terms they lack for ideas they've never even conceptualized. I spent all afternoon sketching the most simplified, step-by-step guidebook in the history of both universes. Even with that, barely half of the leaders sort of grasped it. Ryan proposed that we construct this stronghold as a real-time trial, so everyone can observe and figure it out. I agreed because, honestly, you can't explain to folks who've never seen a base what foundation actually is with just speech and sketches. Once Ryan took off for the capital to recruit nature sorcerers for the elemental clearing and teardown jobs, I chilled by myself in the old stronghold, reflecting. Defensive walls are fine. Their setups stay up on their own without enchantment. Standard homes are pretty easy for me to revamp. But bridges and dikes, those require custom, localized planning. Each overpass spans a unique landscape, and each reservoir holds back totally different water loads. There isn't a universal fix for this stuff. I gotta check out every single spot myself. This construction obsession has pretty much taken over my entire second lifespan. Forget being a combat champion or a magical wunderkind. I am a solo, full-scale Crisis infrastructure crew for a whole nation that never grasped how architecture functions. All because spells made everyone slack off. Back home in my original world, my old man is probably cracking up. Go and see, kid? You should've. Focus way more during those structural design lectures. I was listening, Dad. Trust me, I'm totally locked in now. The stronghold reconstruction went perfectly, Ryan. We recruited a whole squad of nature sorcerers from the capital. The elements reduced the old fort to mere rubble. My troops cleared out the wreckage, and we launched the build completely from scratch. Literally, since Phase 1 meant digging out the basement level, a concept this world had apparently never thought of. Like, structures can go underground. Ryan kept tabs on the elven woods while we handled the job, and he had a brilliant plan to scale things up. Train twice the number of officers required. Deploy half to other base locations right after, mastering the Day 1 basics. Then rotate them with the second group after Day 2. Pure assembly line construction. 12 days later, every single fort along the northern frontier was overhauled exactly how I wanted it. Then I got carried away. I started adding snares, ditches, deer fencing, wooden barricades, and hidden spike pits. With overlapping kill zones, I basically transformed the entire northern border into one massive, never-ending nightmare gauntlet, built by a total paranoid psycho. I just kept going, until everyone around me began staring with these deeply uncomfortable looks. At that point, I awkwardly called it quits. Ryan inspected the completed defensive line from atop his blazing phoenix, and looked legitimately freaked out. He muttered something like, "These setups are way too twisted to come from a mentally stable human being." Once again, I blame my hunter dad. That guy's status as some creative mastermind keeps growing, completely without his awareness or permission. But everyone agreed on one fact. When the elves, that arrogant, self-proclaimed high-end mighty race, catch sight of this absolute monstrosity of a fortification line for the first time, their reactions will be priceless. The vibe at the frontier was more relaxed than it had been in years. When Ryan learned I was planning a backup row of strongholds behind the primary one for reinforcement, he basically went, "All right, I can stop stressing over the border now," and went completely off the grid to grind for the forbidden spell tier. The realm's top fire archmage basically decided my fortifications were solid enough that he could quit babysitting the whole northern front and focus entirely on ascending to a demigod. Honestly, I can't tell if that's the greatest praise I've ever gotten or just a terrifyingly massive burden. 20 days later, Senior Disciple Richard flew in on an eagle bearing grim news. Infiltrators from Lutop had deployed Element Dispel to wreck a crucial bridge down in Southern Creek. Bird needed me back at the capital stat. On our flight back, Richard just couldn't stop hyping up the northern defense line. He claimed the elves might as well pack it in for good. I just smiled and held my tongue, since I was already mapping out Phase 2 in my head. Once I rank up to a mid-tier mage, my classified grimoire unlocks Earth Transmutation Magic, featuring an incantation called Soil Desertification. Just picture turning that entire wooded boundary into pure sand. No dirt means no trees. No trees means no elven raids. Problem permanently solved. But hey, that's a project for down the road. I touched down in the capital and was immediately marshaled straight toward the royal palace briefing chamber. Around 100 earthcasters clad in brown vestments were bickering over fixes. Bird was present. King Nelson VI was present, and Master Hood was present. Turns out everyone had been tracking my fortress builds via magical reconnaissance network known as the Monitoring Eye. They had witnessed everything. The citadels, the pitfalls, the whole defensive barrier. All of it. Hood grinned and said, "My dear ground sinker, your skills just keep on blowing my mind. And now you're dipping into architecture? You even cut Ryan loose to practice forbidden spellcasting. So got any bright ideas for bridges and dams?" 100 earth mages whipped around to face me, looking at me without doubt, without pity. Just pure, real hope. Me, the useless element kid, standing tall before every earth mage in the realm, being called on to fix the kingdom's infrastructure. I whipped out the bridge designs I've been doodling during the Eagle ride, and sketched my fix, an arch bridge with 0 pillars. No enchanted stone, just raw structural engineering, holding itself together through pure compression. The entire room went dead silent. Then the confusion kicked in. Bird pointed at the arch. "What's the deal with this curved shape?" I explained that when I was a kid, I built a tiny bridge like this over a creek, right by my house. No magic, just stones, and it held up for 10 years before giving out. I'd upgraded the blueprint big time since then. It required 0 magic to stay up, just basic physics. Another earth mage shook his head. No support pillars? How can that thing possibly stay up? I pointed out that the edge of the bridge has a massive drop to the riverway below, making pillar supports totally unworkable anyway. And honestly, even if you could place pillars, they'd need magical stone strengthening, leaving them wide open to an elemental dispel. So what choice do we have? Just give the arch a shot. The build time is super quick. Worst case scenario, we waste a couple of days. Most of the mages clearly figured I was out of my mind. An unsupported, bent bridge, in a world where stacking rocks and gluing them with magic passes for elite engineering. But my track, record up at the northern border, had gained so much trust that no one dared challenge King Nelson shut down the arguments with royal authority, ordering immediate construction. Bottom line, Luo Hao is running this whole show. So, I'm heading over to a wrecked bridge right now, armed with a royal decree to break down the whole concept of arches to a society that has absolutely no clue. The rest of the Earth mages are tied up with the 3 dams, leaving me to tackle the bridge solo. Honestly, I'm speed, running the entire timeline of structural engineering across 2 different lifetimes. Roman aqueducts, welcome to the Kingdom of Crete. You guys are about to learn what a keystone is, and it'll completely break your medieval magical minds. I gotta say, watching veteran builders teaming up with wind and earth mages made me realize magic definitely has some perks. Compared to modern heavy machinery, the wind mages can float massive stone blocks right into place, while earth mages bond materials instantly on contact. It's basically telekinetic cranes paired with instant dry cement. I reluctantly conceded that my designs didn't have to cover every single detail from my old life engineering textbooks, since magic was handling the slack. 10 days later, the arch bridge stood complete. Time for the real test. The nature mages carefully dispelled the magic from every support point, and everyone went silent. The bridge stayed rock solid. No swaying, no creaking. Just an elegant stone arch standing there as if it had been built centuries ago, supported by pure geometry and gravity alone. 5 heavily loaded freight wagons crossed over it one after the other, and the crowd went wild. These folks had honestly never seen a build stand up without being held together by magic. For them, it was like seeing someone soar without wings. But to me, it was just a standard arch. The Romans cracked this code 2,000 years ago in my old world. But hey, sure, let's celebrate. Wind mages snatched copies of my schematics and dispersed throughout the realm to oversee bridge reconstructions everywhere. Richard chauffeured me back to the palace, gazing at me the entire trip with a look that mixed pure reverence, disbelief, and a touch of dread. I shut my eyes and meditated because locking eyes with that much fanaticism was physically agonizing. Back at headquarters, the vibe was pretty grim. Over the 10 days I'd spent bridge building, Lutab operatives had executed dozens of strikes targeting the kingdoms. 3 primary dams. The army neutralized and killed most of them, yet one sabotage attempt partially hit the mark. Only a quick-witted Earth Mage warded off a catastrophic burst. Downstream communities were already mapping out evacuations. Every soul in the room stared at me with an almost religious sense of devotion. I'd gone from pity the poor Earth Mage to this guy will save us all over the course of a single winter. No one second-guessed my talents anymore, and nobody brought up my low-tier rank. I was treated like the nation's emergency structural engineering squad, a department of exactly 1. They unrolled 3 sets of damn blueprints across the table. I unfurled them with shaking hands, well aware that if I drafted another miraculous masterpiece, people might start asking questions I simply couldn't answer. Then again, what choice did I have? If these dams break, countless cities drown. Utilizing the magical scrying network, I analyzed the topography surrounding each reservoir site. So I combed through my memories of dam blueprints. From my previous life, 3 locations, 3 totally unique geographical nightmares. I tracked down 3 traditional blueprints that nailed it. The initial one took me barely an hour to sketch, and nobody doubted it for a second. My reputation had bought me complete, blind faith. Rather than nitpicking my bizarre drafts, the veteran sorcerers concentrated on figuring out how magic could streamline the build. For instance, ice. Wizards could literally freeze the river during the overhaul. You definitely don't see stuff like that in basic civil engineering. I pretty much cracked up. My old college professors would have given anything to just put a river on pause. The initial dam was torn down, and the rebuild kicked off right away. While they were building it, I drew up dam number 2, an entirely different layout, just as unorthodox and just as trusted. Hood even offered to act as a courier, using his wings of light to zoom between the sites and pass along updates. An elite grand mage was running errands for my little construction gig. The world had officially gone topsy-turvy. The whole winter was completely swallowed up by building. And not just bridges and dams, I toured throughout the entire realm, retrofitting every major structure that utilized stone reinforcement. The scale of it was wild. I was practically single-handedly dragging a nation's infrastructure into the future, all while playing off my fixes as mere gut feelings. The realm's higher-ups couldn't make sense of my talents. Hood was genuinely pondering changing my moniker from ground sinker to something a bit more prestigious. Bird attempted to hand over his official architect title, but King Nelson made the right call. Keep it all under wraps. On paper, I was still just a low-tier novice mage, way too vulnerable to defend myself if hostile countries came after me. Every single one of my blueprints was officially signed off as Mitterberg's brainchild. I was perfectly fine laying low behind that cover story while, on the flip side, Crete's Secret Service unleashed the most brutal counterstrike you could possibly imagine. They deployed operatives into Lutab packed with element-nullifying gear and completely leveled half of Lutab's key landmarks. The whole duchy ground to a dead halt. When Lutab attempted to rip off my schematics using moles planted in Crete, they just couldn't replicate them because I intentionally held back all the crucial load-bearing data and structural mechanics. Sure, they could copy the look, but they had no clue how they actually stayed up. Their bootleg structures came crashing down. Their operatives got busted and executed, while Rost and Lyra watched Lutab's entire infrastructure crumble in absolute horror, suddenly having a major epiphany, something that had never crossed the mind of any nation on this continent. Standard, non-magical engineering can completely tip the scales of power between rival realms. Architecture, seemingly dry and unexciting, with zero actual combat utility. Yes, architecture had evolved into a high-stakes strategic weapon, and Crete was the sole superpower holding the keys to it. I kicked off this path as a pathetic earth wizard, whom everyone looked down on. Cut to now, and 3 rival empires are completely terrified of my blueprints. Not my magic, not my fighting prowess, but my actual buildings. The construction curse triumphs. It always comes out on top. And to be honest, I'm genuinely starting to make peace with that. Once spring rolled around, the elves finally woke up from their winter slumber and aggressively pushed toward the northern frontier, just like their usual annual routine. Only this time, they smashed headfirst right into my defensive fortifications. The fallout was absolutely wild. Those sneaky, hidden hazards I engineered, turns out they were way more devastating than anyone had ever anticipated. The slanted embrasures within the strongholds allow pyromancers to bombard virtually every square inch of the terrain, all while staying perfectly safe from elven snipers. The subterranean vaults were packed with enough rations and water to hold out straight through next winter. The interconnected bastions set up converging fields of fire, turning any advance into a literal death trap. 3 whole months of the absolute fiercest elven onslaught in recent history. And the final body count for the elves? 5 years' worth of casualties packed into just 1 season. As for Kree, 0. Not a single casualty. None. Take Ryan, the elite flame archmage who normally locks down the entire northern boundary all on his own. He didn't have to hurl a single spark, not even a tiny one. My building blueprint straight up put a super mage out of job. The Elven Council took a cold, hard look at the data, ran the numbers, and commanded a total withdrawal. For the first time ever, Kree enjoyed a completely peaceful summer. I wasn't present at the royal debriefing afterward. I just caught wind of it later, but word is it was quite a spectacle. The whole crew was there. King Nelson Hood, Ryan, and every top-tier official. The vibe was triumphant, yet pretty intense. Prime Minister Conan delivered the updates. The elves were crushed, and Lutab was completely stuck, since they still couldn't figure out engineering without stone bracing. Consequently, they had to deploy guards at every single vital structure, behaving basically like watchmen, guarding an exhibition. Meanwhile, both Rost and Liero had dispatched envoys, practically begging for armistices. Liero even sent over Master Venom, Caster to neutralize Murphy's scorpion toxin as an act of compromise. Finding out Murphy survived was the best news I'd had in months. But then Commander-in-Chief Duke Yalman went totally aggressive. Let's drop the defense and strike right at the top. Wipe them out, then pick off the rest one by one. The pro-war crowd loved it. However, Prime Minister Conan shut that idea down. The state treasury was completely drained from financing both the frontline conflict and my massive infrastructure restoration project. Another major campaign would ruin the kingdom financially. Besides, striking Lutab would instantly provoke the other two nations and force the elves to jump into the fray as well. Focusing on peace and recovery was definitely the smarter move. The peace faction cheered at that. But then King Nelson spoke up, proving he was actually a genius. He mapped out the actual dangers out there that neither side was even taking into account. Ross Wynn's Archmage, Gaia, is currently free of any obligations. He can practice unhindered to unlock forbidden tier magic. If Gaia becomes a second forbidden class sorcerer, it's lights out for us. Luro just demonstrated that they possess an elite senior poison caster no one suspected existed, inches away from Archmage status, wielding a rare attribute that nobody knows how to counter. Even a lightweight like Leto has Robert, the mentalist who literally turned bird droppings into a weapon, and he's only going to get tougher. As for the elves, they don't usually upgrade their skills, but someone was clearly training them to employ elemental nullification strategies. Who? No one knows. Furthermore, those siege towers that all three realms deployed at the exact same time, nobody has a clue where they got them. Identical blueprints across three completely separate countries? That's no fluke. There's a shadowy mastermind pulling the strings. The entire chamber fell dead silent. Nelson had essentially pointed out, we're surrounded by live explosives, and you guys are bickering over whether to strike a match. His proposed strategy was brilliant. Quit trying to dominate through brute military force, and instead secure victory through total magical dominance. Throw everything we've got in a backing. Hood and Ryan to reach forbidden magic status. Ryan's flame affinity aligns perfectly with the sole active forbidden spellcaster, offering a clear blueprint. Hood just needs to quit burning his manacap on revival incantations. Year after year, two apex mages would make Crete totally untouchable. Naturally, Hood and Ryan both pushed back, since of course those selfless psychos would object to getting any handouts. But everyone else voted in absolute agreement. Chilling in my academy room afterward, catching up on these official reports, I couldn't shake off how intense it all felt. The realm was sitting prettier than ever before. My strongholds, bridges, and reservoirs had completely flipped the tactical landscape. Yet the dangers were shifting as well. Secret puppet masters, undercover high-tier mage prospects, trained elves, and shady siege tower suppliers. Then there's me, still just a mediocre, low-ranking apprentice who's just incredibly good at engineering. Somewhere out there, the mastermind pulling the strings behind three nations, and an elven vanguard, is likely staring at Crete's updated defenses and wondering who is pulling this off. Personally, I'd rather they never find out, because unlike my brickwork, I'm apparently not that hard to break. While I was tied up transforming local architecture, the kingdom's entire high command was locked in a fierce dispute regarding what to do with me. I learned about it down the road, and honestly, it's pretty hysterical. Berg insisted on keeping me full-time in construction. His engineering gift totally eclipses his magical abilities. Standard stone reinforcement is useless at this point anyway, so just let the kid design things. Commander-in-Chief Yalman wanted me to serve as a military strategist. His brilliance in tactics is just mind-blowing. The northern line of defense by itself proves we could totally end our alliance on super mages. But then Hood dropped a bombshell. You guys are totally missing the point. His raw magical talent is where the real prize is. He could genuinely reach the level of the Earth King, a forbidden spell mage. The whole room went dead silent. The Earth King stands as the sole documented Earth element forbidden spell mage in the entire annals of magic. Just one guy, ever. And Hood was basically saying I could be number two. Berg stammered that this was being way too optimistic. Even if I actually had that kind of potential, it would take decades, and Crete needed immediate help. Nearly everyone sided with Berg and Yalman. Only a few backed Hood. That was mostly because the Earth King's name holds such legendary status that doubting it felt like straight-up blasphemy. King Nelson wrapped things up with the most sensible take. Anyone had offered all day, let him decide. We don't force our people to give up their lives for the country. That's exactly what makes Crete strong. The Prime Minister worried I'd just opt for the safe, easy path, arguing that I'm just a small-town kid with a narrow worldview. Nelson replied, then guide him and inspire him. I trust he'll make the right choice for himself. Berg, Yalman, and Hood traded knowing grins. They already had a game plan. Phase 1 that plan? Hood declared he would personally run a monthly magical history course at the academy. The whole campus completely lost its mind. A super mage, teaching first-year classes. In the flesh. Berg ordered Andy, Charles, and me to be there. Our upperclassmen were practically green with envy as we rushed over to the element hall, and we barely snagged 3 seats way back in the last row. The room was totally jam-packed, standing room only, crammed with upperclassmen who'd snuck inside by pretending to be freshmen. Then HUD made his grand entrance, and by entrance, I mean the guy literally glided in on wings of light, floating down from above like some celestial deity landing right on a concert stage. The whole auditorium erupted in cheers, while I just stared in total shock. That modest, kind old man I remembered from the war zone was putting on quite a show. This whole thing was completely premeditated. He was totally playing to the crowd. He kicked off with shout-out to a certain brilliant architect who relieved Ryan from his northern border duties. I finally have some time to give back to this academy. It was a clever little shout-out to my construction achievements without explicitly naming me. Pretty smooth. Next, he dropped the main topic, the history of forbidden spell magic. The lecture hall practically shook with hype. It's basically every student's dream subject. Hood went on to explain that forbidden spellcasters aren't actually all that rare in the grand scheme of history. One pops up roughly every few decades. But because their magic causes such apocalyptic devastation, hardly anyone ever witnesses it and survives to write down the tale. Only 3 are actually well recorded. First up, the Ice Empress. Her ultimate forbidden spell, Frozen Hell, could turn absolutely anything to solid ice. She unleashed it to obliterate a massive monster horde that endangered mankind. Those frozen monster statues still get dug up from the ground from time to time, perfectly intact even after centuries. The ice magic geeks in the crowd were practically floating with excitement. Second, the Harbinger of Ruin, Andrew, wielder of the fire-forbidden spell, Judgment Day, alive today, currently serving as the Grand Chairman of the Magic Sanctuary. Hands down the most powerful sorcerer on the face of the earth. The fire tribute students were straight up hyperventilating. Hood then paused for dramatic effect and declared, but our primary topic today is the ultimate legend of them all, the Earth King, the sole forbidden tier Earth Archmage in all of documented history. My ears shot straight up. I must have looked like a startled rabbit. Andy and Charles were both leaning forward, completely slack-jawed. The 3 of us Earth mages had been getting emotionally trashed ever since we first learned our affinity was considered trash tier. We desperately needed this. We needed validation that our element birthed a wizard who stood at the absolute pinnacle of arcane might. I could feel Hood's gaze locking onto me in the crowd. Despite me being in the back row, that old fox was definitely using some scouting spell, no doubt about it. This whole presentation was tailored for an audience of exactly one, me. The Inspiration King Nelson commanded the direction the High Council agreed upon. Hood was subtly manipulating my career path by weaponizing the most sophisticated motivational tool at his disposal, the saga of the most powerful Earth mage to ever exist. And it was totally working on me. I was completely reeled in. Every single fiber of my being was desperate to hear the rest. Hood pressed on with his presentation, and each successive line hit harder than the previous one. The Earth King wasn't merely a forbidden spellcaster. He was the forbidden spellcaster. Modest calculations ranked him at tenfold the power of any other forbidden magic user in existence, while every other known forbidden tier mage could invoke only a single forbidden incantation. The Earth King left behind evidence of 8. 6 of those were multi-element forbidden spells, fusing Earth sorcery with entirely separate elements. He is the solitary figure in history to have ever accomplished that feat. The entire auditorium sat frozen in pure disbelief. I just stood there, totally paralyzed. This guy wasn't just some myth. He was a straight-up, one-man cheat code for reality. Hood laid out the whole backstory for us. More than a millennium ago, back in the Dark Era, the entire continent was a chaotic mess of warring states and formidable non-human factions. The Earth King actually grew up in a tiny border village, nested within a microscopic nation. Both his dad and his 2 older brothers perished in battle. Eventually, they discovered his affinity for earth element magic, packed him off to a magical academy, where his mind-blowing raw talent instantly turned heads. He ended up inventing stone-skin sorcery, and his country saw exactly what he could become. They went all in on his training, and by the time he hit 40, he had risen to become a forbidden spell magus. The 3 empires that used to constantly bully his homeland became the test subjects for his very first forbidden spell. Heaven Shatter, Earth Split. He quite literally tore their landscapes apart, devastating them so thoroughly that they surrendered on the spot. Fast forward just 2 years later, and he engineered a second forbidden earth incantation. With mountain range convergence, he summoned Massive walls of peaks right along his country's frontiers, leaving only a handful of heavily fortified checkpoints for access. His homeland transformed from a defenseless little underdog getting constantly pushed around into an absolutely impenetrable alpine stronghold practically overnight. After that, he completely dropped off the grid, traveling for a decade. Pretty much everyone figured he was gone for good. But then he returned to his old stomping grounds. And that's when things went completely off the rails. First, he unleashed a hybrid forbidden spell that fused necromancy directly with earth magic, known as Reincarnation Rebirth, which resurrected every single fallen soldier who had ever laid down their life for the nation. That meant his father, and yes, even both of his brothers. It was a mass resurrection on a straight-up societal scale. While everyone's jaws were still on the floor, he invoked another wind-earth fusion spell called Sky City. He literally created a whole metropolis up in the clouds. Just whipped it up out of nowhere, a city, floating in midair. At first, nobody wanted to move in, obviously, since living in some levitating sky town sounds utterly terrifying. So, he dropped a third hybrid, a nature-earth spell dubbed Earth's Abundance. Suddenly, every single crop nationwide went from a single yearly harvest to yielding crops every single month. Boom, an instant, endless food paradise. People stopped stressing about basic survival and finally migrated to Sky City because honestly, why not? The dude who engineered it can clearly pull off anything. Word spread fast. Citizens from other war-torn countries began secretly worshipping the Earth King like a straight-up deity. This Earth God religion blossomed from an underground cult into the dominant faith, ultimately uniting every human nation under a single banner. Next, the Earth King launched a massive, continent-wide military crusade, targeting hostile, non-human races, and unleashed 3 more hybrid forbidden spells to subdue the entire continent. That's 8 forbidden spells in total, 6 of which were elemental fusions. The guy raised the dead, constructed cities in the clouds, granted the soil permanent fertility, reshaped the global landscape, and bound the entire known world together. I just sat in my seat, completely paralyzed, because here is the kicker that no one else in this room realizes. Those exact hybrid forbidden spells Hood just detailed, they're all in my book. Every single one. That Earth Magic Grimoire, stashed inside my head, beyond a shadow of a doubt, belonged to the Earth King himself. He likely penned it, which means I'm carting around the personal spellbook of the most legendary archmage to ever live. And right now, I'm using it to dig sandboxes and harden people's skin. It is like owning Leonardo da Vinci's complete, unedited journals. Utilizing them as a drink coaster, a blonde student questioned why Earth magic wasn't considered the ultimate element, seeing as it forged someone so powerful. Hood clarified that the bulk of the Earth King's mid to high tier incantations vanished over a millennium ago. Only a handful of basic, everyday spells survived. Vanished, he muttered. Lost. No way, I have them. Every single one. I am literally sitting on the most thorough compendium of Earth magic on the planet. And I can't breathe a word to anyone. A silver-haired girl then asked how the Earth King could weave hybrid spells using strictly an Earth affinity. Hood replied, honestly, nobody knows. It's assumed his 10-year journey granted him a profound comprehension of the core mechanics of magic. A dark-haired boy chimed in, asking if typical mages could ever hit that milestone. Hood grinned and countered. Most spellcasters will never reach that peak, but true magical feats aren't dictated by your official mage rank. In fact, a prime example is sitting right in this room. Suddenly, every head turned. I felt hundreds of pairs of eyes scanning the audience. The majority knew precisely who Hood was referencing. Catching Hood's faint smirk, my stomach dropped in sheer panic. He was blatantly connecting the dots for everyone. Hailing from a tiny frontier village? Check. Raised by a military father figure? Check. Wielding the earth element with mind-blowing talent? Check. Crafting original, custom-made magic? Check. A war hero who reshaped the nation's destiny? Check. The overlap between myself and the Earth King was so incredibly blatant that he didn't even have to utter my name. He was basically aiming a massive neon sign at my future, telling me, this is your destiny. And the truly terrifying part, it was actually working. Something deep down within me. A spark that had been quietly developing ever since I first manifested. That indecipherable volume in the log cabin was answering to more than just drive, something ancient, something that felt less like a preference and more like a destiny. The growing curse could actually be the Earth King's heritage. And that basic text in my mind might not be some fluke stroke of luck. It could be an interview invite. Andy, Charles, and I wandered back to the Earth Department office, hyped up like we just watched the ultimate blockbuster movie. Richard and the upperclassmen crowded around us instantly, and Andy Doveright, into the most theatrical performance of the Earth King legend I've ever seen. The kid was straight up acting it out. Every single Earth mage in the room. Folks who've been totally down and aimless ever since. Rock reinforcement became completely useless. Suddenly had that spark back in their eyes. Our element birthed a deity. Suck on that. Anyone who ever looked at us with pity. Berg eventually got everyone to chill out and made an announcement. King Nelson was building a tomb for the unknown heroes by the Capitol. A lasting monument for every soldier and civilian who perished for Crete, along with an annual service. The inaugural one was this Sunday. All 4 academies were to attend. The room fell silent. A few students, who had lost loved ones in the conflict, wept quietly. My own chest tightened. Murphy came close to death. 6 Earth mages actually died from bird guano mind control, and endless troops fell across all 4 territories. This event truly mattered. Sunday arrived, and everyone suited up in black garments to journey to the memorial site on foot. No buggies, no giant eagles, just a long, heavy walk. The monument looked gorgeous. A grand monument carved from pure black crystal, wreathed in flowers and flanked by 20 dark crystal pillars, bore the etched names of every confirmed fatality. King Nelson delivered an address, while Prime Minister Conan read through the entire casualty list, naming every single soul, along with a brief sketch of who they were. That took over 3 hours. Then, Commander Yalman went on to personally present special honorary medals and financial restitution to each grieving family. The payouts were so massive, but the people looked legitimately shocked and deeply moved. This kingdom seriously looks after its own. And then came the moment that totally broke me. A company of fully geared soldiers marched out in flawless formation as Yalman announced. A single person's brilliant blueprints slashed the northern border's mortality rate from 30% all the way down to 0. For his own safety, his identity must remain a secret, but please join us in honoring this nameless hero. Right then, every soldier in that unit dropped to one knee and bowed deeply toward the crowd. Yalman explained that these were seasoned veterans who had held down the northern border for years, voluntarily offering this tribute to thank the individual who kept their brothers in arms alive. The audience let out the most deafening roar of applause I've ever heard. I just stood there totally frozen, completely paralyzed. My eyes started burning. These combat troops, real people who had watched their friends die year after year, were kneeling down for me. Not for ground sinker, that ridiculous title, and not for some teenage magic prodigy, but for the actual guy who designed the fortifications that kept their comrades safe. It was a level of honor that medals and titles can't even touch. Yalman locked eyes with me through the crowd and smirked. The guy knew exactly what he was pulling off. This was all part of his master guidance plan, and it absolutely wrecked me on the walk back to campus. I heard absolutely everyone hyping up the anonymous mastermind, and something just clicked inside me. I began picturing expanding that fortification blueprint across Crete's entire perimeter, every single border, every weak spot. If I could protect troops, lives through design up north. Why stop there? Honestly, my blood was pumping with real drive. For the first time since hitting this world. Once back at the office, a sealed envelope was sitting on my desk. Tearing it open, I uncovered 2 things. A formal designation as assistant, strategist for high command, along with a private note from Commander Yalman himself. His message said, "Dear Ground Sinker Luo, how I must again commend you on behalf of the kingdom's entire military. Your efforts on the northern line gained unanimous praise from the generals. We see a natural-born tactical mind in you, and hereby offer you this post. This isn't an order. It will slow your magical growth and force you to operate in shadows. The only reward it brings is the honor of saving countless soldiers. Think it over carefully and reply within a week." Holding that paper felt heavy as a ton of bricks. The guy wasn't using bribes or pulling rank. He was presenting a path of completely silent sacrifice. Engineer ramparts, map out strategies, preserve lives, get 0 credit, and lag behind in magic. It was the total opposite of pursuing the Earth King's renown. For the first time since my reincarnation, I had to face a dilemma I'd been dodging all along. What do I truly want from this second chance at life? Become some legendary, high-tier Grand Mage? Serve from the sidelines as a military planner? Or just chill out with Dad, Rod, and my buddies? Roaming the world with 0 strings attached. I had the Earth King's grimoire locked in my mind, plus modern engineering insights from my past life, and battlefield instincts proven across 3 front lines. On top of that, a realm that desperately needed it all. Too many paths, way too many people relying on me. Yet somewhere beneath all those strategic calculations, I was just a reincarnated college homebody who still felt like a total outsider in this realm. Burr materialized before me right as dusk settled in. Head home. Tomorrow, you're rolling with me to Orco City. I nodded, stepped over to my coach, and just sat in total silence for the entire trip back. For the very first time, I stared down the ultimate reality I'd been dodging. Since day one, I'm likely never going back. This isn't some getaway, and it's not a game. This is my actual life now, and I've got to figure out what to do with it. Meanwhile, though I wouldn't uncover this till much later, King Nelson was sitting, all by himself, in a hidden chamber within the palace, scanning a top-secret intelligence dossier. A single name stood out clearly at the top: Roseville. Whatever that signifies, I have a strong hunch. My options are about to get a whole lot messy, eh? Berg didn't give me the details on why we were heading to Orco City. He simply muttered, "Let's move," and kept quiet through the whole eagle flight. Super mysterious, super dramatic. I just meditated on the back of my mouth and waited for the plot to unfold. Once we touched down, we secured a carriage and made our way to the outskirts of town. Right around then, I began noticing them. Endless rows of makeshift shelters, lining both sides of the roadway, packed with ordinary townspeople who looked like they were barely scraping by. Entire families were cooking over tiny campfires. Kids in threadbare clothes. The kind of sight that just breaks your heart. Then our ride pulled up, and there it was. A colossal, blocky complex that seemed freakishly similar to a Soviet-style housing project from my past life, but larger, way bigger, and totally deserted. Beck stared ahead at the structure like someone gazing straight at their own tombstone. With his back turned to me, he finally opened up. "This was my crowning glory," he said, spilling everything. He'd grown up dirt poor, in a regular family during Creed's nonstop wars. Everyday folks couldn't afford a decent place to live, and every winter, thousands of homeless citizens were left to freeze to death. Once Berg discovered his affinity for earth magic, he swore an oath. Every single civilian in Creed would have a proper roof over their head. He dreamt up this building as a mass housing fix, reinforcing stone to stack units high and wide. A single blueprint, infinitely replicated. The crown took notice. Literally every earth mage in the realm was mobilized to build clones of it nationwide. Within a year, every single display soul in Creed had a home. Berg shot to fame, got scouted by the Academy, and claimed the title of architect. But then the elves figured out elemental dispelling, and his entire life's work turned into a death trap. King Nelson had already ordered mass evacuations. All those tents pitched outside, those belonged to the folks who used to inhabit Berg's blocks. Thousands of families thrown out of their apartments, huddling in canvas shelters that won't last through winter. If no one sorts this mess out before the freeze hits, people are going to die out here. Berg turned around to face me, sporting a raw, desperate look I'd never seen on him before. The magical community sees me as a total joke, just a mage who only managed to cast one spell his whole life. I poured my whole soul into building, drew a crowd, made something that actually mattered. And just like that, some basic tier, one spell wipes it out. He stared straight into my soul and told me, "You got 3 insane gifts: architecture, war strategy, and magic. 3 different routes. And this realm is desperate for every single one of them. Look, I'm not going to force you into building, but I'm literally begging you to lock in on at least one, instead of just coasting through a cozy, pointless life as some low-ranking lord or a basic magic guild member." And right then, the very last piece of the puzzle finally clicked. Hood's lecture on the Earth King, purely meant to spark my inner magic hype. Yalman's whole soldier ceremony and strategist gig, tailor-made to trigger my sense of military duty. And now, this building of Berg's, surrounded by all these homeless families, a guilt trip to activate my engineering conscience. 3 mentors, 3 sales pitches, 3 paths. The king set up the whole chessboard just to steer me into working for the crown. And the scariest part? It totally worked. Every single one of them hit the mark. Standing there, looking out at those tents, remembering the soldiers on their knees, with the Earth King's massive, impossible legacy ringing in my ears. That emotional wall I kept up as a world-hopping transmigrator who was just visiting? Poof, gone. I wasn't some bystander anymore. These were my people now. This was my kingdom. But there was no way I was picking just one option. I flashed Berg a grin and said, "If I'm blessed with 3 talents at once, who says I can't walk all 3 paths at the same time?" Berg just blinked, definitely not the answer he expected. I didn't choose option A, B, or C. I just smashed the walls between them and said, I'm buying the whole place. We stepped inside his prized creation. I gave the framework a thorough, honest look. The damage was nowhere near as bad as Berg dreaded. The units were split into so many small spaces that there was plenty of backup, load-bearing, reinforcement all over. The sole issue lay in the flooring between stories. Those depended completely on stone bracing. My fix: just install steel girders, plain and simple. Lay down metal joists across the subfloors to hold the weight, without relying on enchantments. Berg was doubtful but stressed enough to give it a shot. He deployed crews to forge the steel beams right away. In the meantime, I soared over the entire realm to check out every single residential property, tailoring unique retrofitting blueprints for each one. Berg smirked as he watched me hustle from site to site, thinking I'd taken his side by prioritizing the public. Little did he know, during every single Eagle commute between projects, I was deep in meditation to boost my mana pool, while mapping out every tactical ambush and defense layout from my previous life, to prep for Yao Min's grand strategy. 3 agendas, 1 guy, 0 shut-eye. My daily routine melted into a haze of eagle flights, drafting schematics, meditating, war planning, and running on absolute fumes. My mind was redlining, processing data across 2 entire lifespans. Every waking second was pulling double duty. Could I keep this up? No way. Was it worth the grind? I glanced at those folks living in tents, remembered the troops who bowed before me, and envisioned a world out of reach. An incantation that might remold reality. Yeah, totally worth dealing with this building curse. The burden of a war hero and the Earth King's heritage. I'm going to shoulder all 3 at the same time, on a single set of shoulders that once belonged to some college slacker who couldn't even care enough to step out of his dorm. Pretty wild how iSky completely flips your priorities.